The rift opened above Metropolis at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. No warning, no cosmic fanfare. Just a vertical tear in the sky that bled crimson light across the afternoon sun. And from it fell a figure wreathed in ash and fury. Kratos hit the pavement of Fifth Avenue with enough force to spiderweb the concrete for 20 feet in every direction. Car alarms shrieked, pedestrians scattered, screaming. The Ghost of Sparta rose slowly from the crater, snow-white skin marked with red tattoos that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. And for the first time in what felt like centuries, he allowed himself a single breath of confusion. This was not Midgard, not Olympus, not any realm he recognized. The buildings stretched toward the sky like the fingers of dead giants, glass and steel instead of marble and gold. Mortals fled in terror, but they wore strange clothes and carried glowing rectangles that flashed with light. Horseless carriages lined the streets, sleek and humming with contained energy. The air itself tasted wrong, thick with smoke and metal, absent the sharp clarity of divine realms or the earthy rot of Midgard's forests. Kratos' hand moved instinctively to his back, fingers closing around familiar leather-wrapped handles. The blades of chaos answered his call, twin chains singing as they uncoiled from his forearms, curved blades igniting with primordial fire that had burned since the universe was young. The flames cast dancing shadows across the surrounding chaos, and somewhere in the crowd, a woman screamed louder. "Stand down!" The voice came from above, amplified and commanding. "You are surrounded. Place your weapons on the ground and surrender peacefully." Helicopters. Kratos had seen their like in his son's books. Flying machines without magic, crude but effective. 3 of them circled overhead, black and marked with white letters. MPD men leaned from open doors, strange weapons trained on him. Not arrows, not spears, something else. Kratos' eyes narrowed, mortals playing at authority. "I said stand down," the voice repeated. "This is your final warning." The god of war planted his feet and raised his gaze to the nearest helicopter. His voice, when it came, carried the weight of centuries and the deaths of pantheons. "I do not surrender." The pilot's finger moved toward a trigger and stopped as a red and blue streak materialized between Kratos and the helicopters, hovering in midair as though gravity itself had granted an exception. Superman hung in the sky above Fifth Avenue, cape rippling in wind that wasn't there. The famous S shield catching the distorted sunlight, bleeding through the closing dimensional rift. His expression was measured, cautious, the look of someone who had learned that appearances could deceive. "Easy," Superman said, his voice calm but firm. He spoke to Kratos, but his peripheral vision tracked the helicopters, the fleeing civilians, the entire tactical situation with practiced ease. "Nobody needs to get hurt here. I'm Superman. I'd like to help you, but first I need you to extinguish those blades and tell me your name." Kratos studied the flying man. No wings, no visible magic. The being simply floated as naturally as fish swam or birds flew. Power radiated from him like heat from forge fire. Not divine, but immense nonetheless. The measured posture, the outstretched hand, the earnest expression, all spoke of someone accustomed to talking down threats. But the eyes told a different story. Those blue eyes calculated angles, assessed threat levels, marked exits and civilians, and collateral damage potential. This was a warrior, wearing a diplomat's smile. "I am Kratos," the Spartan replied, making no move to extinguish his blades. "And I did not come here by choice." Superman's expression shifted slightly. Not quite suspicion, but heightened alertness. "Kratos. Okay. The rift that brought you here registered on our sensors as a massive energy spike. We need to figure out where you came from and how to send you back. But first..." His eyes flicked to the blades of chaos, still burning with hellfire. "We need to get civilians to safety. Will you come with me voluntarily?" It was phrased as a question, but Kratos heard the unspoken addendum, "Or will I have to make you?" The Ghost of Sparta had faced this dance before. Gods and kings and cosmic entities, all certain their power granted them authority over him, all learning eventually that Kratos bowed to no one. But this flying man had not attacked, had not demanded, had not threatened civilians to force compliance. The Spartan's grip on the blades loosened fractionally. "Where is this place?" Kratos asked. "Metropolis," Superman answered. "Earth. You're in the United States, son." He paused, reading something in Kratos' expression. "You're not from this Earth, are you?" Before Kratos could answer, the air itself seemed to shimmer, and a new figure materialized on the street beside him. She appeared in a flash of golden light, as though the sun had reached down and carved a woman from its own radiance. Wonder Woman stood in full armor, the golden lasso of truth coiled at her hip, shield on her arm, sword at her back. Her dark hair whipped in an unfelt wind, and her eyes, ancient and knowing, locked onto Kratos with an intensity that made even the Ghost of Sparta pause, because those eyes held recognition. "By Hera," Diana breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Her gaze traveled from Kratos' face to the red tattoos, down to the blades of chaos still smoldering in his hands, and something like horror crept across her features. "Those blades. I know those blades." Superman glanced between them. "Diana, you know him?" Wonder Woman took a step forward, and her hand moved to the hilt of her sword. "I know what he carries. Weapons forged in Hades itself, quenched in the river Styx, bound with the chains of Tartarus." Her voice hardened. "Weapons designed for one purpose: to kill gods." The temperature on Fifth Avenue seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I need you to answer me very carefully," Diana continued, her warrior's instinct overriding diplomatic protocol. "How did you acquire the blades of chaos? They were destroyed millennia ago when..." She stopped, her eyes widened. "When Ares fell," she finished, her voice hollow with dawning realization. "You're wielding the weapons of the god of war himself." Kratos' expression remained stone, but something flickered behind his eyes. Old pain, old rage, old memories of a bargain made in desperation and paid for in blood. "I am the god of war," he said quietly. Wonder Woman's sword cleared its sheath in a whisper of divine steel. Superman moved between them instantly, hands raised in placation. "Diana, wait." "He claims to be Ares," she said, never taking her eyes off Kratos. "The god who betrayed Olympus. The god my mother and sisters fought to imprison. If this is some trick, some resurrection, I am not your Ares." Kratos interrupted, his voice cutting through her rising anger like a blade through silk. "I killed Ares, took his place, and then I killed the rest of them too." Silence crashed across Fifth Avenue like a tidal wave. "You killed them?" Diana's voice was barely audible. "Killed who?" Kratos met her gaze without flinching, and when he spoke, each word carried the weight of divine corpses and burning Olympus. "Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Hermes, Hephaestus, Athena." He paused. "Olympus burned. The gods died screaming, and I walked away through the ashes." If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together. Wonder Woman's face had gone pale. Superman's expression shifted from diplomatic to tactical in an instant. The helicopters above circled tighter, their sensors likely feeding this conversation directly to whoever commanded them. And Kratos, the Ghost of Sparta, the God Killer, stood in the heart of Metropolis with blades burning and truth spoken, waiting to see which of them would move first. The afternoon sun broke through the closing rift one final time, painting Fifth Avenue in shades of gold and crimson, the colors of glory and blood, of heroes and gods, of a collision that would reshape everything. Wonder Woman's sword trembled in her grip, not from fear, but from the sheer impossibility of what she'd just heard. Zeus dead, Olympus fallen, the pantheon that had blessed her, raised her, guided her throughout her life, extinct. "You're lying," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The blades of chaos didn't lie. She could feel their authenticity, sense the divine murder etched into every link of those cursed chains. Superman's eyes had shifted to that peculiar X-ray focus, scanning Kratos from a dozen angles simultaneously. His physiology is... I've never seen anything like it. He's not human, not Kryptonian, not any meta-human signature I recognize. His cellular structure is... Clark paused, adjusting his vision. Divine. He's telling the truth about being a god. A god who committed deicide, Diana said sharply. Do you understand what that means? The cosmic order, the balance of... Your cosmic order is not mine, Kratos interrupted. His stance shifted slightly, weight redistributing, chains coiling tighter around his forearms. Not aggressive, but ready, always ready. I speak only of my Olympus, my Zeus, gods who deserved their fate. Deserved? Diana's voice rose. You murdered an entire pantheon and claim they deserved. They tortured mortals for sport, Kratos said, his voice like grinding stone. Raped, enslaved, destroyed cities for petty grievances. Zeus himself, his jaw clenched, has more bastards than there are stars and cared for none of them. When I begged Ares to save my family, he granted me power, but demanded everything in return. When I sought redemption, Athena used me as a weapon. When I finally stood before Zeus and asked only to be left in peace, he tried to murder me. The raw honesty in his words cut through Diana's outrage like a blade. She'd heard the stories, read the histories, knew the Greek gods were far from perfect. But this wholesale condemnation? The gods I serve are not like that, she said, but even she could hear the defensive edge in her voice. Then you are fortunate, Kratos replied, or you are blind. Superman stepped forward before Diana could respond, his voice cutting through the tension with practiced diplomacy. Okay, let's take a breath. Kratos, you said you didn't come here by choice. Who sent you? And where, exactly, did you come from? Kratos' gaze shifted to the Kryptonian. This one he couldn't read as easily. Power radiated from Superman like heat from the sun itself. But there was something else. A fundamental wrongness in how he existed. Not divine, not mortal. Something caught between, forged by forces Kratos didn't recognize. Kratos paused, searching for words. In Midgard, the Norse realm. After Olympus fell, I sought to leave Greece behind, raise my son away from divine corruption. But the gods found me anyway. Odin, Thor, Freya, another pantheon, another war. His expression darkened. Tyr, the Norse god of war, claimed I was a threat to the cosmic order itself. A multiversal anomaly who had disrupted the natural flow of divinity. He opened a rift and cast me through, said I would find myself somewhere I belonged. Tyr, Diana repeated. The Norse Tyr exists in your universe? Existed, Kratos corrected grimly. He made an enemy of the wrong Spartan. Superman and Wonder Woman exchanged a glance. A being powerful enough to kill two separate pantheons worth of gods, standing in the middle of Metropolis. carrying weapons that had ended divine bloodlines. "We need to contact the Watchtower," Superman said quietly to Diana. "Get Batman, Flash, the full League." "I will not be caged," Kratos said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "I will not be interrogated like a criminal. I have broken no laws of this place. I harmed no one here. I ask only to understand where I am and how to leave." "You claim to have killed multiple gods," Diana countered. "That makes you a threat only to gods who threaten me." Kratos finished. "Do your gods plan to attack me, Princess? Because if they do, they will learn what your Zeus learned." Diana's hand tightened on her sword hilt. "That sounds like a threat." "It is a promise." The air between them crystallized with tension. Superman's eyes flicked between the two warriors, calculating intervention angles, wondering if he could move fast enough to prevent whatever was about to happen. Then, a new voice crackled through the comm unit in Superman's ear, and simultaneously through speakers on the circling helicopters. "Superman, this is Watchtower. We're reading massive energy signatures from your location. Recommend immediate containment and..." The voice paused. "Wait. Diana, is that you? What's your assessment?" Wonder Woman's jaw clenched, but she didn't take her eyes off Kratos. "Cyborg, we have a metahuman claiming to be a god killer from an alternate universe. He's armed, potentially hostile, and..." She hesitated. "I believe he's telling the truth." Static crackled. "Repeat that." "He's telling the truth," Diana said more firmly. "The weapons he carries are authentic artifacts of divine murder. I can sense it." "Well, that's just fantastic." A new voice cut in, younger, more casual. "The Flash." "So we've got an interdimensional god slayer standing in downtown Metropolis. Should I grab some popcorn, or are we fighting this one?" Kratos' eyes narrowed. "How many of you are there?" "Enough," Superman said carefully. "Look, Kratos, I understand you're confused and probably on edge. But we can help you. The Justice League, we're heroes. We protect people. If you really were sent here against your will, we want to help you get home. But we can't do that if you're standing in the middle of a populated city with weapons drawn." "Weapons I have not used," Kratos pointed out. "Yet," Diana added coldly. The Ghost of Sparta's gaze shifted to her, and for a moment something almost like respect flickered in his expression. She was a warrior, that much was clear. No false pleasantries, no pretending this was anything other than what it was. A standoff between forces who didn't trust each other. He could work with honesty. "I will agree to speak with your League," Kratos said slowly. "But not as a prisoner, not in chains, not surrounded by weapons and warriors ready to strike. If you want my cooperation, you will have my word. If you want my submission..." The blades of chaos flared brighter, hellfire licking up the chains toward his arms. "You will have war." Superman processed this. It was more than he'd expected, honestly. Most beings powerful enough to challenge the Justice League didn't offer negotiation as the first option. "Your word," Clark said carefully. "What exactly are you promising?" "That I will not attack unless attacked. That I will answer your questions truthfully. That I will seek understanding before violence." Kratos' expression remained granite hard. "But no, this. I have been betrayed by gods who spoke with honeyed tongues. I have been manipulated by entities who claim to offer salvation. If your League proves to be another cage, another pantheon seeking to control me..." The temperature around him seemed to rise as the blades burned hotter. "Then I will do what I have always done." "Break free," Diana finished, her voice barely audible. "By any means necessary." Kratos confirmed. Silence stretched across Fifth Avenue. Police had cordoned off the area 3 blocks out. News helicopters circled at a distance, their cameras no doubt broadcasting this confrontation across the world. Somewhere in the watchtower, the rest of the Justice League was likely suiting up, preparing for the possibility that this situation would deteriorate into combat. Superman made his decision. "Okay," he said, extending his hand. "You have my word that we won't treat you as a prisoner. Come with us to the watchtower, our headquarters, and we'll figure out what happened, where you came from, and how to send you back. No chains, no cells, just conversation." "Clark," Diana hissed. "You can't be serious. He's admitted to defending himself against corrupt gods." Superman interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. "Diana, I know this challenges everything you believe about Olympus. But what if he's telling the truth? What if the gods in his universe really were tyrants?" He turned back to Kratos. "We're not your enemies. We don't want to fight you. We just want to help." Kratos studied Superman's outstretched hand. The gesture was simple, almost childish in its innocence. A handshake, a mortal custom that gods had always considered beneath them. This flying man, this Superman, offered it without hesitation, without guile. The Ghost of Sparta had learned to trust nothing and no one. But he had also learned that sometimes the only path forward was through the unknown. Slowly, deliberately, Kratos extinguished the flames on the blades of chaos and sheathed them on his back. Then he reached out and clasped Superman's hand. The Kryptonian's grip was strong, genuinely strong, not the pretend strength of mortals trying to impress. Kratos felt the power coiled in those muscles, sensed the potential for devastating force held in careful check. This one could fight if it came to that. "To your watchtower, then," Kratos said. "But know that if this is deception, it's not," Clark said firmly. "You have my word." Wonder Woman sheathed her sword, but her expression remained troubled. "I'm coming with you. If he's telling the truth about his Olympus, then our gods need to be warned. A being who can kill Zeus is a threat to every pantheon." "I am a threat to tyrants," Kratos corrected. "Your gods have nothing to fear from me unless they give me reason." "That," Diana said grimly, "is exactly what worries me." Superman activated his comm. "Watchtower, we're bringing him in. Prepare for arrival, but stand down on defensive measures." He's agreed to talk. "Understood," Cyborg's voice responded. "But Clark, we're going to want a full briefing, because our sensors just finished analyzing those blades he's carrying, and the energy signature is impossible. They're reading as weapons forged before our universe's gods even existed." Kratos allowed himself a grim smile. They had no idea what impossible truly meant. The watchtower materialized around them in a flash of light and the distinctive hum of teleportation technology. Kratos' hand moved instinctively to his blades, muscle memory from countless ambushes screaming danger. But he forced himself still. He had given his word. The chamber they arrived in was circular, vast, and utterly alien. Walls of gleaming metal stretched upward to a domed ceiling, inlaid with lights that pulsed like captured stars. Screens flickered with images of the world below. Cities, oceans, weather patterns tracked with inhuman precision. Through massive windows, Kratos could see the curve of Earth itself against the black void beyond. And for the first time in his long existence, the god of war felt genuinely disoriented. "We're in the sky?" he asked, his voice betraying nothing of his confusion. "Higher," Superman said, gesturing to the windows. "We're in orbit, 22,000 miles above Earth's surface. The watchtower is our base of operations. Lets us monitor threats across the entire planet. Kratos moved to the window, his reflection ghostly against the starfield beyond. He'd walked between realms, climbed the peaks of Olympus, traversed the frozen wastes of Helheim. But this, floating in the void between worlds, looking down at an entire planet as though it were a map, this was power on a scale even gods rarely commanded. "Impressive," he admitted. "Your mortals built this?" "With some help," a new voice said. Kratos turned to see a figure emerging from a doorway, a man whose body was a seamless fusion of flesh and chrome, technological components integrated so completely that it was impossible to tell where the human ended and the machine began. His single human eye studied Kratos with unsettling intensity, while a glowing red optical sensor tracked every micro-movement. "I'm Cyborg, Victor Stone. And before you ask, yes, I'm mostly machine. Long story." "Machines that think," Kratos said flatly. "In my experience, that ends poorly." "Yeah, well, I'm one of the good ones." Cyborg's arm transformed, components shifting and reconfiguring into a scanning array that swept over Kratos in pulses of blue light. "And right now, I'm trying to figure out what you are exactly. Because my sensors are giving me readings that don't make sense. Your cellular structure is baseline human, but denser. Your skeletal system reads as reinforced with some kind of divine metal I can't identify. And those ashes," he gestured to the pale coating covering Kratos' skin, "are bonded at the molecular level, permanent. The ashes of my wife and daughter," Kratos said quietly, "bound to me by a village oracle, a curse and a reminder." The clinical atmosphere in the room shifted. Even Cyborg's scanning paused. "That's..." Victor struggled for words. "I'm sorry. Do not be. I earned this curse." Kratos' expression remained stone. "I killed them. Ares tricked me into it, made me believe I was slaughtering my enemies when I was really butchering my own family. The ashes ensure I never forget what I am." Superman and Wonder Woman exchanged glances. The raw honesty was almost harder to process than the violence he described earlier. Before anyone could respond, the doorway hissed open again, and 3 more figures entered. The first moved so fast he was barely a blur. A young man in red with lightning crackling around his form, skidding to a stop with a grin that seemed perpetually stuck between amused and amazed. The Flash studied Kratos with open curiosity, circling him twice before anyone could blink. "Okay, wow, you're really pale," Barry said. "Like, seriously, do you ever see the sun? Wait, you're covered in ashes? That's dark. I mean, literally and figuratively. Also, those blades are insane. Are they on fire right now, or is that residual heat? Can you juggle them? I bet you can't juggle them. Nobody ever expects..." "Barry," Superman said tiredly, "give him space." The second figure was armored, head to toe in gleaming metal, glowing circles embedded in the chest and palms marking advanced technology that hummed with barely contained power. But unlike Cyborg's integration, this was a suit, removable, external. The faceplate slid up to reveal a sharp-featured man with calculating eyes and a carefully maintained goatee. Tony Stark studied Kratos the way a scholar might study an ancient text, his gaze lingering on the blades of chaos with obvious interest. Wait. Kratos' brow furrowed. Something was wrong. Superman had spoken of the Justice League, of heroes from this world. But this man, the armor design, the casual arrogance in his posture, the arc reactor glowing in his chest. "You're not from here," Kratos said bluntly. Tony's eyebrows rose. "Perceptive. No, I'm usually about 3,000 miles west, but when the Justice League calls about an interdimensional god-killer showing up, I make exceptions." He extended his hand. Tony Stark, Avenger, philanthropist, genius, not necessarily in that order. Kratos ignored the hand. Avenger? Different hero team, same general idea. We protect Earth from threats too big for conventional forces. Tony lowered his hand without apparent offense. And speaking as someone who's fought a literal god before, Thor, great guy, terrible taste in capes. I'm very interested in understanding how you managed to kill an entire pantheon. For purely academic reasons, of course. The third figure had been standing silently in the shadows, and only now stepped forward into the light. No armor, no weapons visible. Just a man in a dark suit with a cape, cowl concealing most of his face except for white lenses and a grimly set jaw. But the way he moved, the perfect economy of motion, the way his eyes tracked every detail of Kratos' posture and positioning, marked him as perhaps the most dangerous person in the room. Batman, the Dark Knight, introduced himself. His voice was gravel and midnight. We need to talk about those blades. Kratos' eyes narrowed. You plan to take them from me? I plan to understand them. Batman produced a small device from his belt, its screen displaying complex energy readings. Cyborg scans show they emit a unique radiation signature. Divine energy, but corrupted somehow. Twisted, they're not just weapons. They're cursed artifacts that feed on the wielder's rage and guilt. His white lenses fixed on Kratos. How long have you been bonded to them? Since I swore myself to Ares' service, Kratos said. Decades ago, centuries perhaps. Time loses meaning when you war with gods. And you've never tried to destroy them? I have tried. They return. Kratos' jaw clenched. The blades of chaos are bound to me as surely as these ashes, a reminder of the bargain that destroyed my life. Batman's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding born of his own cursed mission. Weapons forged from trauma, the Dark Knight said quietly. I know something about that. Wonder Woman stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. Enough philosophy. We need answers. Kratos, you claim your Olympus was corrupt, that Zeus and the others deserved death. But you also said you killed Tyr, a Norse god. How many pantheons have you destroyed? 2, Kratos said. Greek and Norse. Though Norse gods still live, Freya, Thor's sons, others who had no part in Odin's schemes. I killed only those who threatened me or my son. Your son? Superman's expression softened. You have a child? For the first time, something like warmth touched Kratos' features. Atreus, boy, he is in Midgard still, I hope, safe from this. The warmth faded. If I cannot return, he will think I abandoned him. He will face the consequences of my wars alone. The raw pain in those words cut through the tactical assessment happening around the table. These were heroes who understood loss, who carried their own burdens of guilt and responsibility. Flash broke the silence. Okay, so not to be insensitive, but we're talking about actual mythology here. Greek gods, Norse gods, they're real in your universe? They were real, Kratos corrected. Most are dead now. Right, because you killed them. Got it. Barry's mind was clearly racing. But here's the thing. We have gods too. Diana's from Themyscira, blessed by the Greek pantheon. Zeus, Athena, Ares. They're all alive and active in our universe. So either there are multiple versions of the same gods across different dimensions, or I am in a universe where my greatest sins never happened. Kratos finished, his voice hollow. A world where Olympus still stands. Diana's expression was unreadable. Our Olympus is not perfect. The gods have their flaws, their conflicts, but they protect humanity more than they harm it. Zeus is stern but just. Athena is wise. Even Ares. She paused. Even the god of war serves a purpose in maintaining cosmic balance. Your Ares, Kratos said, his voice dropping to dangerous levels, has not made you murder your own family for his amusement. If he had, you would understand why I feel no guilt for what I did to mine. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Tony Stark's hand moved unconsciously toward his repulsor, more reflex than intent. Flash's lightning crackled brighter. Even Superman tensed, ready to move at superhuman speed if necessary. But it was Batman who spoke, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You killed them in self-defense. Everyone turned to look at him. The gods in your universe, Batman continued, his analytical mind piecing together the pattern. They attacked first, manipulated you, used you, and when you sought freedom, they tried to kill you. Every divine death you've caused was reactive, not proactive. You're not a conqueror or a tyrant. You're a survivor who learned to fight back. Kratos stared at the dark night, surprise flickering across his features. You understand. I understand what it means to be hunted by powers greater than yourself, Batman said. And I understand the choice between submission and survival. His gaze didn't waver. But I also understand that self-defense can become vengeance, that justified violence can evolve into something darker. So I need to know, if our Olympus challenged you, if Zeus himself appeared and demanded you kneel, what would you do? The question hung in the air, like a sword suspended by a single thread. Kratos was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant, remembering, Olympus burning. Zeus's corpse beneath his hands, the taste of ash and blood and hollow victory. I would tell him, Kratos said slowly, that I have no quarrel with gods who leave me in peace, that I seek only to return to my son and live what remains of my cursed existence in quiet. His eyes hardened. But if he attacked me, if he sought to chain me or control me or harm those I protect, the blades of chaos seemed to pulse on his back, responding to his rising anger. Then I would show him exactly what I showed my Zeus. Wonder Woman's hand moved to her sword. That sounds like a threat to my gods. It is a boundary, Kratos corrected. I will not kneel. I will not submit. But neither will I attack unprovoked. Your gods are safe from me, princess, as long as they extend the same courtesy. Superman stepped forward, his diplomatic instincts trying to de-escalate. Okay, that's something we can work with. Mutual non-aggression. Nobody attacks anybody unless... The alarms screamed. Red lights flooded the watchtower, and Cyborg's body lit up with emergency protocols, his hands flying across holographic interfaces that materialized from thin air. We've got a problem, Victor announced, his voice tight. Major problem. Boom tube opening over Washington, D.C., and the energy signature is... He paused, his eye widening. New god technology. Apocalypse origin. Batman's expression darkened. Darkseid. Superman's jaw clenched. How many? Just one signature so far, but it's big. Really big. Cyborg pulled up a display showing a massive armored figure materializing above the National Mall. Preliminary scan reads it as Kalibak, Darkseid's son. Perfect, Tony muttered, his faceplate snapping down. Genocidal new god warlord shows up on the same day as our interdimensional god killer. What are the odds? Kratos was already moving toward the window, his warrior's instincts assessing the new threat. Below, on the curved surface of Earth, he could see a growing darkness over one of the cities, and even from orbit, he could sense something wrong. This was different than divine power, older, heavier, wrong in a way that made even his godhood recoil. "This Darkseid," Kratos said, not turning from the window. "He is a god." "Worse," Wonder Woman said grimly, moving to stand beside him. "He's a new god. Beings from planets beyond our dimension who exist as living concepts. Darkseid embodies tyranny itself. His son Kalibak is a berserker, but incredibly strong. If he's here, it's a message. A message to who?" Diana's reflection met his in the window. "To you. Darkseid monitors threats across the multiverse. If you tore through dimensions and landed here, he knows. And if you've killed gods before..." She paused. "He'll want to test you himself, or recruit you, or destroy you before you become a problem." Kratos turned from the window, his expression carved from granite. "Then it seems your gods are not my only concern in this universe." Superman was already moving toward the teleporter. "Everyone suit up. Kalibak doesn't make social calls. If he's in DC, people are dying." He looked at Kratos, hesitation clear in his eyes. "I know we just met, and I know you have no stake in this fight, but..." "There are innocents below?" Kratos interrupted. "Thousands." The Ghost of Sparta reached back and drew the blades of chaos, hellfire erupting, along their edges with a sound like screaming souls. The flames cast dancing shadows across the watchtower's pristine walls, and every hero in the room felt the temperature spike. "Then what are we waiting for?" Kratos growled. The teleporter deposited them 3 blocks from the National Mall. And immediately, Kratos understood why Superman had called this an emergency. Kalibak stood in the center of the reflecting pool, his massive form towering 12 feet tall, rippling with muscle that seemed carved from living stone. His armor was dark and spiked, designed less for protection and more for intimidation. And in his hands, he wielded a weapon that crackled with energy that made Kratos' teeth ache. A beta club. Cyborg had called it during the brief tactical overview in transit. But it wasn't Kalibak that drew Kratos' attention. It was the carnage. Bodies littered the ground, tourists, security personnel, people who'd been in the wrong place when a dimensional portal tore open and vomited out a berserker god. Some were crushed, others burned. A few were simply gone, reduced to ash by energy weapons Kratos didn't recognize. The Ghost of Sparta had seen this before. Olympus, Sparta, countless battlefields, across multiple realms, divine beings treating mortal lives like insects beneath their boots. Something cold and familiar settled in his chest. "Kalibak," Superman's voice rang out across the mall, amplified by sheer lung power and righteous fury. The Man of Steel floated 20 feet above the ground, cape billowing, fists clenched. "Stand down, now." The new god turned, and his face split into a grin that exposed teeth like tombstones. His voice was gravel and thunder and the promise of violence. "Superman, I was hoping you'd show. Father wants to know if the rumors are true, if an anomaly really did fall through dimensions into your precious Earth." His yellow eyes swept across the assembled heroes, lingering on Tony's armor, dismissing Flash's speed, noting Wonder Woman's divine signature with interest. Then, those eyes found Kratos. Kalibak's grin widened. "There you are. You know who I am?" Kratos asked, his voice deadly calm. "Know you? I've heard the whispers across the multiverse, godling. A being who ended pantheons, who broke cosmic laws by making divine death permanent." Kalibak hefted his beta club, energy crackling along its length. "Father is very interested in meeting you. He sent me to extend an invitation." "By killing innocents?" Wonder Woman's voice was ice and fury. Her sword was already drawn, shield raised. "That's not an invitation. That's a declaration of war." "These?" Kalibak gestured dismissively at the bodies. "These are insects. Mayflies who live and die in the span of heartbeats. Why should gods concern themselves with..." He didn't get to finish. Kratos moved. The blades of chaos screamed through the air, chains extending with supernatural speed as the Ghost of Sparta closed the distance between them in 3 powerful strides. Kalibak raised his beta club to block, but Kratos wasn't aiming for the weapon. He was aiming for the throat. The right blade caught Kalibak across the neck, hellfire erupting on contact. And for the first time in centuries, the son of Darkseid felt pain that actually registered. "These insects," Kratos snarled, his face inches from Kalibak's as the new god staggered back, "are under my protection now." The heroes watching felt the air shift. This wasn't a meta-human fighting a villain. This was a god defending mortals against divine tyranny, the same pattern Kratos had followed across multiple universes, refined into lethal instinct. Kalibak roared and swung his beta club in a horizontal arc that would have liquefied a normal human. Kratos ducked under it, chains wrapping around the weapon's haft, and yanked. The new god stumbled forward, off balance, directly into a rising knee strike that caught him in the solar plexus with enough force to crater the ground beneath them. He's fighting Kalibak hand to hand. Flash breathed, lightning crackling around him in nervous excitement. Is he insane? No, Batman said quietly, his eyes tracking every movement. He's experienced. Look at the positioning. He's not trying to overpower Kalibak. He's using leverage, speed, exploiting openings. That's not rage, that's tactical genius. Superman started to move forward, to help, but Wonder Woman caught his arm. "Wait," she said. "Watch." Kalibak recovered faster than Kratos expected. New god physiology was different from Olympian, denser somehow, more resilient. The beta club came around in a backswing that Kratos barely dodged, energy discharge scorching the air where his head had been a moment before. "You fight well for a godling," Kalibak growled, his neck already healing from the blade wound. "But you've never faced a new god. We don't die like your pitiful Olympians." "Everyone dies," Kratos said. "Some just need more convincing." He launched himself forward again, this time leading with the Leviathan axe he'd pulled from his back. Frost exploded outward as the weapon connected with Kalibak's armor, ice crystallizing across dark metal. And the new god actually flinched. "Impossible," Kalibak snarled. "That's Jotnar magic, Norse realm craftsmanship. How does a Greek godling?" The axe buried itself in his shoulder, and Kalibak's roar of pain echoed across the National Mall. "I am not Greek," Kratos said, twisting the axe deeper. "I am not Norse. I am not bound by a single pantheon or realm. I am what remains when gods fall and mortals rise to take their place." He ripped the axe free in a spray of something that looked like liquid light instead of blood, then threw it. The Leviathan axe spun through the air, trailing Frost, and embedded itself in a support column 50 yards away, safely away from the fight. Kalibak stared at the wound in his shoulder, genuine surprise crossing his brutal features. "You actually hurt me. I'm just getting started." This time when Kratos attacked, he activated Spartan Rage. The transformation was instant and terrifying. Red energy exploded outward from the Ghost of Sparta's body, his muscles swelling, his eyes burning with crimson light. The blades of chaos ignited with fire so intense it turned the reflecting pool to steam. And when he roared, it carried centuries of fury and pain and unbreakable will. The first punch caught Kalibak in the ribs, hard enough to crack armor that had withstood Superman's strikes. The second shattered his beta club. The third, fourth, and fifth came so fast, they blurred together into a continuous assault of divine wrath. Kalibak tried to fight back, throwing punches that would have destroyed buildings, but Kratos moved through them like they were nothing. Pain was an old friend. Injury was temporary. Rage was eternal. "Okay, Tony said, his faceplate sensors struggling to keep up with the speed of the exchange. That's officially terrifying. JARVIS. Are you getting this data? Yes, sir, the AI responded. Preliminary analysis suggests his strength increases proportionally to his emotional state with a focus on anger, Batman finished. He fights better the angrier he gets. It's not just berserker rage, he's still tactical, still controlled. The anger fuels him without consuming him. Wonder Woman watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. She'd fought Ares, battled gods and monsters, but this was different. Kratos fought with a brutal efficiency that spoke of countless divine murders, each technique honed through trial and error against beings who should have been unkillable. He wasn't just strong, he was educated in deicide. Kalibak managed to create distance, his armor cracked and leaking that strange luminous blood. He was breathing hard, something that should have been impossible for a new god. Enough, Kalibak roared. You want a real fight? Then face this. His eyes began to glow, and twin beams of red energy erupted from them. Omega beams, the signature weapon of Apocalypse. Kratos raised his guardian shield, the circular barrier expanding to full size just as the beams struck. Energy met divine, metal in a shower of sparks, and the Ghost of Sparta's feet carved trenches in the ground as he was pushed backward from the sheer force. But the shield held. Impossible! Kalibak's eyes burned brighter, pouring more energy into the assault. Omega beams cannot be blocked. They track, they pursue, they can be endured. Kratos growled through gritted teeth. His arms trembled from the strain, muscles knotted with effort. But he held. He tanked lightning from Zeus, fire from Helios, the crushing weight of Atlas's fists. This was just another god throwing another tantrum. Superman moved forward, ready to intervene, but Batman's hand shot out. Not yet, the Dark Knight said. He needs to do this himself. Bruce, those are Omega beams. They'll kill him if... Look at his eyes, Batman interrupted. Clark did, and saw not fear, not desperation, but cold calculation. Kratos was measuring the assault, timing something. The Omega beams cut off abruptly as Kalibak's eyes flickered, the strain of maintaining them evident. In that half-second gap, Kratos exploded forward with superhuman speed, shield still raised, and crashed into Kalibak like a battering ram. The impact drove them both backward into the Lincoln Memorial, marble shattering as tons of divine flesh and fury plowed through President Lincoln's stone legs. Inside the monument, away from civilian eyes, Kratos dropped the shield and went to work. His fists hammered Kalibak's face with mechanical precision. Left, right, each strike calculated to cause maximum damage, to disorient, to break. When the new god tried to grab him, Kratos headbutted him hard enough to crack his facial armor. When Kalibak tried to activate his mother box, the small device at his belt that could open boom tubes, Kratos ripped it free and crushed it in his fist. No escape, the Ghost of Sparta said, his voice barely recognizable through the Spartan rage. No rescue, just you and me and the truth you've forgotten. What? Truth? Kalibak gasped, his regeneration struggling to keep up with the damage. Kratos leaned in close, his red eyes boring into Kalibak's yellow ones. Gods bleed. He drove both blades of chaos into Kalibak's chest, angled upward toward where a heart might be if new gods had such things. Hellfire erupted inside the wound, burning from within, and Kalibak's scream shattered the remaining windows in the memorial. Outside, the Justice League and Avengers watched in stunned silence as the Lincoln Memorial shook with the force of combat that would have destroyed lesser structures. Should we? Flash started. No, Wonder Woman said firmly. Her expression was complex. concern mixed with something that might have been approval. This is his fight, his statement. Statement? Tony asked. To Darkseid, Diana explained. Kalibak was sent to assess the threat and deliver an invitation. Kratos is sending a response. The shaking stopped. Silence descended over the National Mall, broken only by the crackling of residual fires and the distant wail of emergency sirens. Then Kratos emerged from the memorial, dragging Kalibak's unconscious form by one leg. The new god was alive. His chest rose and fell with labored breathing, but he was comprehensively defeated. His armor was shattered, his face was pulp, and his legendary durability had been beaten into submission through sheer, relentless violence. Kratos dropped the body at Superman's feet. He lives, the Ghost of Sparta said, his Spartan rage fading, leaving him covered in luminous new god blood and breathing hard. But when he wakes, he will tell Darkseid that I am not interested in invitations, that I want only to return to my son, and that if his father attempts to force the issue, Kratos met Superman's eyes. I will treat him exactly as I treated this one. Clark stared at the broken form of Kalibak, a being who had fought the entire Justice League to a standstill on multiple occasions, who had required coordinated effort from Superman, Wonder Woman, and others to finally defeat. Kratos had done it alone, in under 5 minutes. You could have killed him, Superman said quietly. Yes. Why didn't you? Kratos looked at the bodies scattered across the mall, the innocents who died because gods played their games with mortal lives as collateral. Because I am trying, he said slowly, to be better than the monster I was. Killing a defeated enemy serves no purpose except feeding my rage. And I have fed that rage enough for several lifetimes. He reached out with his mind, and the Leviathan axe tore itself free from the column where it had embedded and flew back to his hand in a flash of frost and ringing metal. Batman stepped forward, his expression unreadable behind the cowl. You held back. What? Against Kalibak. You held back. I saw it. You could have ended that fight in the first 30 seconds, but you extended it. Drew it out? Why? Kratos' jaw clenched. Of course the detective had noticed. Because I needed to know, he admitted. Needed to understand the power levels of this universe. The speed of your enemies, their durability, their recovery rates. If I am trapped here, I must understand what I'm facing. So you used Kalibak as a measuring stick, Tony said, a hint of respect in his voice. Brutal, but smart. And the verdict? Wonder Woman asked. Kratos looked at each of them in turn. Superman with his godlike power constrained by morality, Wonder Woman with her divine heritage and warrior's discipline, Batman with his mortal flesh and immortal determination, Flash with speed that defied comprehension, Tony Stark with his genius wrapped in metal, Cyborg with his fusion of man and machine. You are strong, he said finally. Stronger than many gods I've killed. But more than that. He paused, searching for the right words. You fight for something beyond yourselves. I see it in how you positioned yourselves during the battle, always between Kalibak and the civilians, always thinking of them first. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. That is not how gods fight. That is how heroes fight. It is unfamiliar. Superman extended his hand again, the same gesture he'd offered hours earlier. Then maybe, Clark said gently, you finally found allies who deserve the title. Kratos stared at the hand for a long moment. Then, still covered in the blood of a new god, the Ghost of Sparta clasped Superman's hand and felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: hope. The watchtower's medical bay hummed with activity as emergency protocols processed the aftermath. Kalibak had been transported to a specialized containment cell, one designed to hold new god physiology, while Cyborg coordinated relief efforts on the ground below. The death toll stood at 47 civilians, with hundreds more injured. It could have been worse. It should have been worse. Kratos stood at the observation window, watching Earth rotate beneath him, his armor still stained with luminous blood. He'd refused medical attention. His godhood was already knitting the minor wounds he'd sustained, and had instead maintained this vigil, silent and brooding. Wonder Woman approached cautiously, her footsteps deliberately audible. Warriors recognized when silence was a choice rather than an oversight. "You fought well," she said, coming to stand beside him. "I fought angry," Kratos corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Diana studied his reflection in the glass. "You channeled that anger into protecting innocence. You could have ignored Kalibak's provocation, let us handle it. Instead, you took the lead." "He killed mortals because he could," Kratos said flatly, "because they were beneath his notice. I have heard that reasoning before. From Zeus, from Odin, from every divine tyrant who believed mortality made life meaningless." His fists clenched. "I will not stand by and watch it happen again." Diana was quiet for a moment, processing the conviction in his words. "Our gods aren't like that. Zeus, my Zeus, has his flaws, but he doesn't casually murder mortals. He protects them." "Does he?" Kratos turned to face her directly. "Or does he protect the worship they provide? The prayers that feed his power? Tell me, princess. When was the last time your Zeus intervened in mortal affairs without demanding something in return?" The question hit harder than Diana wanted to admit. She'd grown up on Themyscira, raised on stories of Olympus's benevolence, but she'd also walked among humanity long enough to know the gods were selective in their interventions. "They have rules," she said. But even to her own ears it sounded defensive. "The pact between gods prevents direct interference in mortal affairs except under specific circumstances. It's to prevent divine wars from destroying Earth." "Convenient," Kratos said. "In my experience, rules that benefit the powerful while constraining the weak are called chains, not protection." Before Diana could respond, the door hissed open and Batman entered, carrying a datapad and wearing his usual expression of controlled intensity. "We need to talk about what happened down there," he said without preamble. "Specifically about how you fought." Kratos turned from the window. "You disapprove?" "I'm analyzing," Batman corrected. "You exhibited combat patterns consistent with someone who's fought dozens, maybe hundreds, of divine-level opponents. Your tactics weren't improvised. They were refined through repetition." He pulled up footage on the datapad, showing Kratos' fight with Kalibak frame by frame. "Here, you targeted the mother box before Kalibak could activate it. How did you know what it was?" "I didn't," Kratos admitted. "But I recognized the behavior, reaching for an object at the belt when losing a fight. In my experience, that's either a weapon or an escape route. Easier to destroy it than find out which." Batman's eyes narrowed behind his cowl. "You've faced teleportation before." "Hermes had winged sandals that let him traverse realms instantly. I took them after I killed him." Kratos' voice carried no pride, just statement of fact. "Heimdall, the Norse all-seer, could transport using the Bifrost. I learned to predict the patterns, disrupt the process." "You learned to counter divine abilities through trial and error," Batman said, and something that might have been respect crept into his voice. "Repeatedly putting yourself in life-threatening Situations until you understood the mechanics well enough to develop countermeasures. That is how you kill gods, Kratos said simply. You study them, learn their arrogance, their patterns, their certainty that they cannot be defeated. Then you prove them wrong. Diana's hand moved unconsciously to her sword hilt. You're talking about systematic deicide, treating the murder of gods like a science. Because it is. Kratos met her gaze without flinching. Gods are powerful, but they're predictable. They've ruled so long they've forgotten how to adapt, how to fear, how to imagine their own mortality. That makes them vulnerable. And you exploit that vulnerability, Batman said. It wasn't a question. I survived by it. The Dark Knight studied Kratos for a long moment, his detective's mind assembling pieces. You said Ares tricked you into killing your family. That was the beginning, the moment that set you on this path. But you could have stopped after you killed him, could have walked away. Instead, you went on to destroy the entire Greek pantheon. Why? The question hung in the air like a blade. Kratos was silent, his jaw working as memories surfaced. Olympus burning, Athena's betrayal, Zeus's lightning ripping through his chest, Pandora's sacrifice, the weight of the blade of Olympus, the feeling of his divine father's neck snapping beneath his hands. Because they wouldn't let me go, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I killed Ares and claimed his throne as god of war. I wanted only to forget, to live quietly with my memories and my guilt. But the gods saw me as a weapon. Athena sent me on quests, Zeus commanded my service, and when I finally refused, his fists clenched. Zeus tried to kill me, tried to erase me from existence because I dared to want freedom. So I killed him. And then the others came, Poseidon seeking revenge for his brother, Hades for his realm, Hermes to stop me from reaching Zeus's killer. Each death was self-defense. Each murder was survival. He turned back to the window, his reflection ghostly against the stars. By the time I stood over Zeus's corpse, Olympus was ruins, and I was drenched in divine blood. I had become exactly what they always feared, a god killer who couldn't be stopped, wouldn't be controlled. So I walked away and let their realm burn. The raw honesty in his words created a heavy silence. Diana looked shaken, confronting a version of events where her beloved gods were the villains. Batman's expression remained neutral, but his mind was racing, cataloging the pattern. Abuse, retaliation, escalation, genocide. And the Norse gods? Batman asked. How did that war start? I sought peace in Midgard, Kratos said. Took a wife, raised my son, tried to leave the Ghost of Sparta behind. But Baldur came, one of Odin's sons, cursed with invulnerability and sent to bring me to Asgard. When I refused, he attacked. When I defended myself, I killed him. Kratos' shoulders sagged slightly. His mother Freya cursed me for it. Odin declared me an enemy of Asgard. Thor came seeking vengeance. It was Greece all over again. Gods who wouldn't accept that I just wanted to be left alone. So you killed them too, Diana said, her voice carefully neutral. I killed those who threatened my son, Kratos corrected. Odin, Thor, others who made the mistake of hunting me. But Freya still lives. Thor's children survive. I am not a monster who slaughters indiscriminately, princess. I am a father protecting his child from divine tyrants who see mortals as property. Batman and Wonder Woman exchanged glances. The pattern was becoming clear. Kratos wasn't a conqueror or a villain. He was a traumatized survivor with godlike power who'd learned that the only way to protect what he loved was through overwhelming, preemptive force. Dangerous, absolutely. Evil, that was more complicated. The question now, Batman said, is what happens when our gods learn you're here. And they will learn. Diana's presence alone will ensure Olympus hears about the god killer from another dimension. Then I will tell them what I told you, Kratos said firmly, that I want only to return home, that I have no interest in their politics or their realm. But if they attack me, if they threaten those under my protection, the blades of chaos seem to pulse on his back. They will discover I am very good at defending myself. That's what worries me, Diana said quietly. Our Zeus isn't a tyrant, Kratos. Our Olympus isn't corrupt. But they won't understand the distinction you're making. They'll see you as a threat to divine order itself. And they won't wait to be attacked before acting. Then they will make the same mistake my Zeus made, Kratos said coldly, and they will learn the same lesson, which is that gods can die, and that I remember how. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Diana's hand tightened on her sword hilt, ancient instincts warring with newfound understanding. Batman remained still, calculating contingencies, wondering if there was any scenario where this didn't end in divine bloodshed. The door hissed open again, and Superman entered with Cyborg and Flash. Clark's expression was grave. "We have a situation," he said. "Kalibak's regaining consciousness, and when we scanned him, we found something. Victor?" Cyborg pulled up a holographic display showing the new god's physiology. He's been modified. Recent alterations to his neural structure. Some kind of organic recording device integrated directly into his brainstem. Everything he experienced, everything he saw. Victor's mechanical eye fixed on Kratos. "It's all being transmitted to Apocalypse, to Darkseid." Flash whistled low. "So tall, dark, and tyrannical just watched you beat his son into paste. That's probably not great. Darkseid now knows exactly how you fight," Batman said, his tactical mind already running worst-case scenarios. "Your techniques, your power levels, your behavioral patterns. He's studying you." "Good," Kratos said, surprising everyone. "Let him study. Let him see what happens to gods who threaten me. Perhaps it will make him reconsider his invitation. Or it will make him more interested," Superman said quietly. "Darkseid doesn't fear power, Kratos. He collects it. And you've just demonstrated a very specific, very valuable skill set. The ability to kill divine beings that are supposed to be unkillable." The implications settled over the room like a shroud. "He'll try to recruit you," Batman said. "Offer you power, purpose, revenge against the gods who exiled you. And when you refuse, and I believe you will refuse, he'll try to break you. Make you into a weapon whether you want to be one or not." Kratos' expression hardened into something ancient and terrible. "I have been a god's weapon before. I have worn chains and served masters and murdered for divine amusement. Never again. If this Darkseid believes he can control me." The Ghost of Sparta's eyes burned with cold fury. "Then he is welcome to try. I have toppled thrones before. I can do it again." "Darkseid isn't like the gods you fought," Diana warned. "He's not bound by a single realm or pantheon. He exists across multiple dimensions simultaneously, and his true form is so powerful that even his presence can fracture reality. The Darkseid you'd fight here is just an avatar, a fraction of his full power." "Then I will destroy his avatars until he learns to leave me alone," Kratos said simply. "Or until he brings his full form and faces me as Zeus did, god to god, with no tricks and no proxies." His gaze swept across the assembled heroes. "I did not ask to come to your universe. I did not seek this conflict. But I will not run from it either. I am Kratos, and I do not kneel." Superman studied the god-killer for a long moment, seeing not arrogance, but exhausted determination. The stance of someone who'd fought so many battles they'd lost count, who expected betrayal because it was all they'd ever known. "You don't have to fight alone," Clark said gently. "That's what I've been trying to tell you. The Justice League, we protect Earth from threats exactly like Darkseid. We've fought him before, and we've won. If he comes for you, he comes through us." Kratos looked genuinely surprised. "You would stand between me and a cosmic tyrant? When you barely know me? When I've admitted to murdering pantheons?" "Yes," Superman said without hesitation. "Because despite everything you've done, everything you've been, you made a choice today. When Kalibak was killing innocents, you didn't hesitate. You didn't calculate. You just acted, the same way we would have. That tells me more about who you are than your past ever could." Batman cleared his throat. "Though we should probably establish some ground rules before we fully commit to—" "Bruce?" Diana interrupted, her eyes still on Kratos. "He fought to protect mortals from a god who saw them as worthless. Whatever his past, whatever his methods, that action speaks to who he's trying to become." She took a breath, coming to a decision that clearly cost her something. "My gods will want answers. They'll demand I bring you before Olympus to be judged. I'm not going to do that." Kratos' eyebrows rose fractionally. "You would defy your gods for me?" "I would defy them for the principle you represent," Diana corrected. "The idea that gods should be held accountable, that divine power doesn't grant the right to abuse mortals. My Zeus may not be your Zeus, but—" She paused, honesty forcing the words out. "But I've seen enough to know that accountability matters, even for gods." The moment stretched, heavy with significance. The Amazon princess choosing mortal justice over divine command. A Kryptonian offering friendship to a god-killer. A mortal detective extending trust to someone who embodied everything he fought against. And Kratos, the Ghost of Sparta, the monster who murdered Olympus, felt something crack in the armor he'd built around himself. "I accept your alliance," he said quietly. "But know this, if your gods attack me, I will defend myself. I will not die to preserve your cosmic order or divine peace. My son waits for me in another universe, and I will return to him. Whatever stands in my way, god, demon, or cosmic tyrant, will fall." "Fair enough," Flash said, breaking the tension with his characteristic grin. "But maybe we can avoid the whole god murder thing through diplomacy? You know, talking before stabbing, just a thought." Despite everything, Kratos' lips twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. "We can try," he said. "But in my experience, gods don't listen until you make them bleed." Batman's comm unit crackled. "Watchtower, this is ground control. We're getting reports of seismic activity in Greece. Mount Olympus region. Energy signatures consistent with—" The voice paused, uncertain. "With divine manifestation. Multiple sources." Diana's face went pale. "They're gathering. They know." Superman's expression hardened into determination. "Then we better get ahead of this before it becomes a war." Kratos' hands moved to the blades of chaos, muscle memory and bitter experience guiding the motion. "In my experience," the Ghost of Sparta said grimly, "it's already a war. They just haven't admitted it yet." Mount Olympus rose from the Greek mainland like a throne carved by titans, its peaks shrouded in clouds that had never quite behaved like normal weather. Even from the Watchtower's orbital perspective, cyborg sensors detected anomalies, energy signatures that bent physics, spatial distortions that suggested the mountain existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Greek gods maintain a pocket dimension anchored to the physical mountain, Diana explained, as they reviewed the tactical display. Olympus proper exists outside normal space-time, accessible only to those with divine blood or explicit invitation. Or those who force their way in? Kratos added quietly. His eyes tracked the energy readings with the familiarity of someone who'd breached divine sanctuaries before. Olympus has defenses, automatons, divine guardians, barriers designed to repel mortal armies. You've stormed Olympus before, Batman said. Not a question. Twice, once to kill Ares, once to kill Zeus. Kratos' expression was distant, remembering. The first time, Athena granted me passage and aid. The second time, I carved my way through everything they threw at me. Titans, gods, creatures that hadn't seen mortal realms in millennia. By the time I reached Zeus's throne room, Olympus was burning. The assembled heroes absorbed this in uncomfortable silence. They were discussing a man who'd literally waged war against heaven and won. Our Olympus isn't the same, Diana said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. They won't attack unprovoked. They'll want to talk, to understand. They're already mobilizing. Cyborg interrupted, his sensors tracking new energy spikes. I'm reading 17 distinct divine signatures converging on Mount Olympus. The big ones, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Ares, Athena. They're all manifesting physical forms in our dimension. 17, Kratos repeated, his jaw clenching. A council of war, then, not a diplomatic envoy. Superman moved to the center of the command table, his leadership instincts taking over. Okay, we need to control this situation before it escalates. Diana, you have the strongest connection to Olympus. Can you request an audience? Explain what happened with Kratos? Establish that he's not a threat. I can try, Diana said, though doubt clouded her features. But Zeus is proud. The idea that someone killed his counterpart in another universe, that divine order could be challenged so completely. She shook her head. He'll see Kratos as a threat to everything Olympus represents, an existential challenge to the concept of divine supremacy. Then he would be correct, Kratos said bluntly. I am a challenge to that concept. I proved that gods can be held accountable through force, that divine power doesn't grant immunity from consequences. If your Zeus fears that truth, he has reason to. Batman's fingers flew across a holographic keyboard, pulling up historical data. Olympus hasn't directly interfered in mortal affairs on a large scale since World War II. They maintain a policy of observation and minimal intervention. But there have been incidents, times when they've acted against perceived threats to divine order. His eyes met Kratos's. In every recorded case, they've shown overwhelming force. No negotiations, no trials, just divine judgment. So they'll try to kill me, Kratos said calmly, without asking questions, without hearing my side, just like my Zeus did. We won't let that happen, Superman said firmly. You're under Justice League protection now. If they want to get to you, they go through us first. Clark, Diana's voice carried warning and pain. These are my gods, my family. You're asking me to potentially fight against... I'm asking you to stand for justice. Superman interrupted gently, but firmly. Even if it means questioning the beings who gave you power. Especially then. Isn't that what being a hero means? The weight of the question settled on Wonder Woman's shoulders like Atlas's burden. She'd spent her entire life revering Olympus, serving their ideals, acting as their champion in the mortal world. But she'd also spent years among humanity, learning their capacity for growth and change, seeing that mortals often displayed more wisdom than gods. And now she stood at the crossroads, forced to choose. We should at least attempt diplomacy, Tony Stark said, his armor's sensors tracking the same energy signatures Cyborg was monitoring. Go in talking, leave room for negotiation. Maybe they'll surprise us and actually listen. Doubtful, Kratos said. But I will agree to try. I have no desire to kill your gods, princess, only to survive long enough to return home. Flash vibrated nervously, lightning crackling around his feet. So what's the play? We all just fly to Mount Olympus and knock on the divine door? That seems like a good way to start a war we're trying to prevent. Small team, Batman decided, his tactical mind already assembling the pieces. Diana takes point. She has divine authority they'll recognize. Superman and I accompany her for diplomatic weight and strategic backup. Kratos comes under our protection, making it clear he's not acting alone. And the rest of us? Cyborg asked. Stand by positions. If this goes wrong, we'll need rapid response. Batman's eyes found Tony. Can you get the Avengers on alert? This could escalate beyond Justice League capacity. Already done, Tony said. Thor's particularly interested. Turns out he knows about the Norse pantheon and other dimensions. When he heard Kratos killed his counterpart Universe's Odin, he got very quiet. That's never a good sign with Thor. Kratos' expression sharpened. There is a Thor in this universe. Asgardian prince, god of thunder, really into dramatic cape work, Tony confirmed. Why? The Thor I killed was Odin's son. Violent, arrogant, powerful beyond most gods I'd faced. Kratos' hand moved unconsciously to a scar on his shoulder. He nearly killed me. Twice. If your Thor is anything like mine. He's not, a booming voice said from the teleporter pad. They all turned to see a massive figure materializing in a flash of rainbow light. 8 feet of divine muscle wrapped in Asgardian armor, wielding a hammer that crackled with lightning and possibility. Thor Odinson stepped forward, his blue eyes fixed on Kratos with an intensity that made the air itself seem charged. I am Thor, son of Odin, the thunder god said, his voice carrying the weight of storms and ancient oaths. And I have seen the recordings of your battle with Kalibak. I have heard the whispers from Heimdall, who sees across dimensions and reports that you slew my father's counterpart in another realm. He paused, and something complex flickered across his features. I would speak with you, Kratos of Sparta, god to god, killer to survivor. The tension in the room ratcheted up to dangerous levels. Superman moved slightly, positioning himself between Thor and Kratos. Wonder Woman's hand found her sword hilt. Even Tony's repulsors charged with a high-pitched whine. But Kratos simply met Thor's gaze steadily, reading the layers beneath the formal challenge. You want to know if I'll try to kill you? Kratos said bluntly. I want to know, Thor said, his voice dropping to something more personal, more raw. If the Odin you killed deserved it. Because mine. He stopped, jaw clenching. My father is complicated. Wise but manipulative. Protective but controlling. I have questioned his methods, fought against his commands, struggled with the weight of his expectations. Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened. So, when I hear that another version of him was killed by someone fighting for their family's safety, I find myself wondering, would I have done the same? The honesty in those words cut through the posturing and threat assessment. This wasn't a challenge. It was a question from someone who understood divine family dynamics from the inside. Your Odin may be different from mine, Kratos said carefully. Mine hunted me across realms because I represented a threat to his power. He sent Baldur first, invulnerable, unstoppable, cursed with inability to feel anything. When Baldur failed and I killed him in self-defense, Odin declared war. sent Thor, sent Heimdall, sent everything Asgard could muster. His eyes met Thor's. I didn't want to kill them. I wanted to be left alone. But they wouldn't allow it. So I did what I had to do to protect my son. Thor was silent for a long moment, processing this. Then, slowly, deliberately, he set Mjolnir down on the deck, a gesture of peace among Asgardian warriors. "Then you are not my enemy," the Thunder God said. "And I will stand with Superman's League in ensuring Olympus doesn't make the same mistake Odin did." Diana's eyes widened. "Thor, you can't be serious. You're talking about potentially fighting the Greek pantheon." "I'm talking about preventing an unjust war," Thor corrected, his voice carrying the authority of a prince and the conviction of someone who'd learned hard lessons. "I have seen what happens when gods act on fear rather than wisdom. My father nearly destroyed Jotunheim over perceived threats. Odin's paranoia has started wars that cost countless lives." He looked at Kratos with something approaching respect. "If the Olympians cannot see the difference between a threat and a refugee, then they need to be reminded that divine power comes with divine responsibility." "That's a dangerous position to take," Batman observed, though his tone suggested approval rather than criticism. "Truth often is," Thor replied. Superman took a breath, feeling the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders. "All right, then we have our team. Diana, Thor, Kratos, and myself will approach Olympus. Batman coordinates from the watchtower. Everyone else on standby." His gaze swept across the assembled heroes. "Our objective is diplomatic resolution. We explain what happened, establish Kratos' situation, and request Olympian assistance in returning him to his home dimension. No threats, no provocations. We give them every opportunity to do the right thing." "And if they choose violence?" Kratos asked. "Then we defend ourselves," Superman said firmly. "But we don't strike first. We don't escalate. We show them that there's another way, that gods and heroes can coexist without domination or fear." "An idealistic plan," Kratos said. "It's the only plan that doesn't end in divine war," Clark countered. Kratos studied Superman's earnest expression, seeing the unshakable conviction that drove the last son of Krypton. It reminded him, painfully, of Tyr before corruption, of Athena before her betrayal, of all the gods who'd claimed to serve higher purposes before their masks slipped. But it also reminded him of his son, of Atreus' belief that they could be better, that the cycle of violence could be broken, that gods could change. Maybe, just maybe, this universe's heroes were different. "Very well," Kratos said. "We try it your way first, but I'm bringing my weapons." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Superman said with a slight smile. 20 minutes later, they stood in the Watchtower's teleportation chamber, 4 beings who represented the collision of multiple cosmic philosophies. Wonder Woman, champion of Olympus torn between loyalty and justice. Superman, the last Kryptonian who believed in redemption above all else. Thor, the thunder god who'd learned to question divine authority. And Kratos, the ghost of Sparta who'd killed his way to freedom and now sought only peace. "Last chance to reconsider," Flash said from his console position. "I could vibrate you all to safety if things go sideways." "Things will go sideways," Batman said from his command station, multiple screens displaying tactical data. "The question is how badly, and whether we can prevent it from becoming catastrophic." Diana activated her mother box, a small device similar to the one Kratos had crushed on Kalibak, but this one designed for peaceful communication rather than conquest. "Olympus, this is Diana of Themyscira. I request audience with the Pantheon on a matter of cosmic importance. I come in peace, accompanied by allies, seeking wisdom and guidance." For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then reality split open. Not a boom tube's violent rending, but a graceful parting of dimensional barriers, revealing a doorway of golden light that smelled of ambrosia and ancient power. Through it, they could see marble halls stretching into impossible distances, architecture that defied mortal physics, and at the far end, a throne room where divine presences gathered like storm clouds. "They're granting you an audience?" Cyborg said, his sensors analyzing the portal. "But Kratos, you should know, the energy signature on that gateway includes binding spells. They're planning to contain you the moment you step through." "Of course they are," Kratos said grimly. "Gods never negotiate from positions of trust." "We can abort," Superman offered. "Find another way to—" "No." Kratos straightened, his hands resting on the blades of chaos. "I've faced worse than binding spells, and if diplomacy fails—" He met each of their eyes in turn. "I need to know if this universe's Olympus is worth preserving, or if it's just another divine tyranny that needs to fall." Diana's breath caught. "Kratos, I'm not threatening them, Princess," he said more gently. "I'm establishing boundaries. If they respect mine, I'll respect theirs. But if they try to chain me, try to cage me, try to control me the way my gods did—" His expression hardened. "Then they'll learn the same lesson, and you'll have to decide which side of that lesson you stand on." Wonder Woman looked at Superman, at Thor, at the portal leading to her gods and the confrontation that could reshape everything she believed. "Let's go," she said finally, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her eyes. "And pray to every god that exists that wisdom prevails over pride." They stepped through the portal together, leaving the watchtower and the mortal realm behind. Olympus awaited, and with it, the judgment that would determine whether Kratos found allies or enemies, peace or war, redemption or the familiar taste of divine blood. The golden light swallowed them, and reality shifted to accommodate gods. The throne room of Olympus stretched before them like the dream of an empire that had forgotten how to end. Columns rose hundreds of feet toward a ceiling that showed not stone, but living sky. Clouds drifting across an impossible sun. Constellations wheeling in patterns that predated human astronomy. The floor was marble veined with gold, polished to mirror brightness, reflecting the assembled pantheon like accusations. 17 gods stood in a semicircle around the central throne, and the weight of their combined presence pressed down like atmosphere at ocean's depth. Kratos had felt this before. The suffocating certainty of divine judgment, the sense that reality itself bent to accommodate beings who'd forgotten they were part of it rather than above it. His hands tightened on the blades of chaos, old instincts screaming danger even as he forced himself to remain still. They were assessing him. He could feel it. Eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations now focused on the pale-skinned warrior who'd killed their counterparts in another reality. Zeus sat upon the throne, not the broken, desperate tyrant Kratos remembered strangling to death. This Zeus was vital, powerful, his white beard perfectly groomed, his eyes sharp with intelligence rather than paranoia. Lightning played across his shoulders like a living cape, and when he shifted, thunder rumbled in the distance despite the clear sky. But the way he looked at Kratos, the calculation, the assessment of threat, the assumption of superiority, that was familiar enough to make the Ghost of Sparta's teeth clench. "Diana," Zeus's voice rolled across the throne room like distant storms. "Daughter of Hippolyta, champion of Themyscira, princess of our Amazon people, you bring guests to Olympus." His gaze slid to Superman, to Thor, and finally settled on Kratos with the weight of mountains, including one who carries the stench of deicide, whose very presence is an affront to cosmic order. Father Zeus. Diana stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tension coiling through her frame. I bring Kratos of Sparta, refugee from another dimension, under Justice League protection and... Under your protection? The voice came from the left. Ares, god of war, stepping forward from the assembly. He was younger than Kratos remembered, less scarred, his armor gleaming crimson rather than corroded with blood. But the hungry look in his eyes, the eager anticipation of violence that was universal across all versions. You grant protection to one who claims to have murdered me? Who wears weapons designed specifically to kill gods? I murdered a version of you, Kratos corrected, his voice cutting across the throne room. In my universe, you were a monster who tricked me into slaughtering my own family for your amusement. You deserved what I did to you. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Several gods' hands moved to weapons, Ares' face flushed with divine fury. You dare. Ares started forward. Peace. Zeus's single word carried the weight of commandment. Ares stopped, but his expression promised future violence. Zeus leaned forward on his throne, his eyes never leaving Kratos. You speak of another universe, another Olympus, one where I too fell to your blades. You tried to kill me first, Kratos said flatly. You feared what I represented, a son who wouldn't bow, a god who questioned divine authority. So you attempted to murder me to preserve your power. His eyes met Zeus's without flinching. I simply refused to die quietly. Refused to die? Athena spoke now, stepping forward with her owl perched on her shoulder, her gray eyes calculating. Or refused to accept the natural order. Gods rule, mortals serve. That is the law written into the fabric of reality itself. For a demigod to rise against that order, to shatter it through violence. She paused. That is not defense. That is rebellion, chaos, revolution. It was survival, Kratos countered. Though I notice you frame it in terms of order and law. In my experience, the powerful always do, wrapping their tyranny in philosophy to make it sound noble. Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir held loosely but ready. I have stood where Kratos stands. I have questioned my father's wisdom, challenged Asgard's traditions, fought against the assumption that divine heritage grants the right to command mortal lives. His voice carried across the throne room. What he describes is not chaos. It is accountability, something gods rarely face. Thor Odinson. Poseidon emerged from the assembled gods, his trident gleaming with power drawn from every ocean in the world. Your reputation precedes you, the prince who defied his father, who values mortals above his own kind. We know your sympathies. The word dripped with contempt. But this is Olympian business. You have no authority here. I have the authority of someone who's seen what happens when gods abuse their power unchecked, Thor replied. My father's paranoia nearly destroyed entire realms. Odin's assumption that he knew best led to wars, exiles, and suffering that could have been avoided through simple honesty. He looked at Zeus. Kratos killed his Zeus because that Zeus attacked first. If you make the same mistake, you'll face the same consequences. The throne room erupted. Gods shouted, voices overlapping in divine cacophony. Hades demanded Kratos be cast into Tartarus immediately. Hermes suggested binding him in chains forged from concept itself. Apollo argued for a trial, at least the appearance of justice before judgment. Aphrodite watched with calculating eyes, seeing opportunities in the chaos. And through it all, Zeus remained seated, his expression unreadable. Superman raised his voice, letting it carry with Kryptonian lung power that cut through the divine argument. Enough. This isn't helping anyone. We came here seeking dialogue, not conflict. Kratos is trapped in our universe through no fault of his own. He wants only to return to his son, to the life he was building in his own realm. If you could help us find a way to send him home, this entire situation could be resolved peacefully. Peacefully. Hera spoke for the first time, her voice dripping with bitter amusement. The Queen of the Gods regarded Superman with eyes that had witnessed countless mortal heroes rise and fall. The last son of Krypton speaks of peace while harboring a being who has committed genocide against two pantheons. Do you not see the irony, Superman? Or are you simply naive? I see someone defending himself against gods who wouldn't accept his freedom. Clark replied firmly. And yes, I believe in giving people, even gods-turned-god killers, the chance to choose a different path. That's not naivety, that's hope. Hope is a mortal luxury, Zeus said, his voice quieter now, but somehow more dangerous. We who are immortal must think in longer terms, patterns, consequences. He stood from his throne, and reality itself seemed to straighten in his presence. This Kratos represents a precedent. If gods can be killed by those they've wronged, if divine authority can be challenged through violence, then what? Chaos. Every demigod with a grievance takes up arms against Olympus. Every mortal who feels slighted declares war on heaven? Perhaps, Kratos said, and every eye turned to him. Gods should consider not wronging their children in the first place. The silence that followed was absolute. You dare lecture us? Ares' hand moved to his sword. You, who murdered your way across pantheons, who left divine realms in ruins, who represents everything opposed to cosmic order. You presume to teach gods about morality? I teach nothing, Kratos said. I simply state what I've learned through blood and ashes, and the deaths of those who thought themselves above consequence. Gods who treat mortals with respect have nothing to fear from me. Gods who abuse their power, who see mortality as weakness to exploit. His eyes found Ares. Those gods should be very afraid. Ares drew his sword. Then let us test your conviction, godling. You claim to be the god of war. I am war, its essence, its truth, its eternal nature. Face me in single combat, and we'll see which war god stands when the blood settles. Ares, no, Diana started. Yes, Zeus said, cutting her off. His eyes gleamed with something ancient and calculating. Single combat. Ares against Kratos. A test not just of strength, but of philosophy. Let the god of war who best understands conflict's nature prove it in the arena where war is truest, personal violence. Father, this is madness, Athena said, her strategic mind seeing the dangers. If Kratos defeats Ares, as he claims to have done in his universe, then we will know the true measure of the threat, Zeus finished, and we will act accordingly. But if Ares triumphs, as I expect, then this god-killer will face divine justice for his crimes against cosmic order. His gaze fixed on Kratos. Do you accept these terms, Ghost of Sparta? Or do you hide behind Superman's protection and admit your victories were achieved through deception rather than skill? The manipulation was obvious. Zeus baiting him, using pride to force acceptance of terms that favored Olympus. Kratos had seen this tactic before, fallen for it before, learned the hard way that gods stacked every deck in their favor. But he also recognized something else. This was as close to a fair chance as he'd get from Olympus. A trial by combat was at least honest violence. unlike the political games and theological arguments that would follow if he refused. "I accept," Kratos said. "But know this, I will not hold back. I will not restrain myself to preserve divine dignity. If your Ares challenges me, he faces the full weight of what I am and what I've done. The Ghost of Sparta doesn't lose because gods expect him to. Nor does the god of war yield to upstart killers who mistake murder for mastery." Ares shot back, his sword igniting with flames that burned with all the fury of every war humanity had ever waged. Diana grabbed Kratos' arm. "You don't have to do this. We can find another way." "There is no other way," Kratos said quietly, his eyes on Ares, but his words for her. "Your gods have already decided I'm a threat. This combat is just formality, theater to justify whatever they've already chosen to do. But in single combat, at least the outcome is honest, god against god, skill against skill." His jaw clenched. "I prefer honesty to politics." Superman stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If you kill him, there's no coming back from that. They'll see it as proof you're exactly what they fear." "And if I lose, I die or worse," Kratos replied. "I've faced this choice before, Superman. Bow and live as a slave, or fight and risk everything for freedom. I chose to fight then. I choose the same now." Thor gripped Kratos' shoulder, a warrior's gesture of respect. "Fight well, God-killer. Show them that skill and determination matter more than divine birthright. And if they seek to betray the terms of combat," Mjolnir crackled with lightning, "they'll find Asgard has strong opinions about honor violated." Zeus gestured, and the throne room transformed. The marble floor split, revealing an arena beneath, ancient stone stained with ichor from countless divine duels, surrounded by ascending seats where gods could observe. This was Olympus's proving ground, where divine disputes were settled through violence when diplomacy failed. How appropriate, Kratos thought, that even immortal beings ultimately settled their differences through bloodshed. "The terms are simple," Zeus announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the expanding arena. "Single combat to first surrender, incapacitation, or death. No interference from allies. No use of abilities that would destroy Olympus itself. The ye-heard victor's judgment stands." "And if I win?" Kratos asked. "Then we acknowledge your right to exist in our universe unmolested," Zeus said, though his expression suggested he considered this outcome impossible. "You will have earned the respect due a true god of war. We will aid you in finding passage home." "And if Ares wins?" "Then you submit to Olympian justice for your crimes against cosmic order," Zeus replied. "Imprisonment in Tartarus until we determine how to safely return you to your own dimension where your rebellion belongs." Chains, Kratos thought. Always chains. Gods could never simply let anyone walk away free. But he nodded. Agreed. The arena fully formed around them, and the assembled gods took their seats in the stands. Diana, Superman, and Thor were escorted to a section reserved for honored observers, witnesses who would ensure the terms were honored. Though Kratos suspected that if Olympus chose treachery, even heroes couldn't prevent it, Kratos and Ares stood 50 feet apart on blood-stained stone, the two gods of war facing each other across a chasm of dimensional difference and philosophical divide. Ares rolled his shoulders, his armor clanking, his sword blazing with flames drawn from humanity's endless capacity for violence. "I've waited millennia for a worthy challenge. Every god, every titan, every would-be champion who thought they could defeat war itself, all failed. You'll be no different, pretender." Kratos drew the blades of chaos, hellfire erupting along their lengths. He said nothing. He'd learned long ago that words before combat were just noise. Truth revealed itself in blood and steel, and which warrior remained standing when silence returned. Zeus raised his hand, lightning crackling between his fingers. "Let the trial begin," the king of Olympus declared. Thunder crashed, and the two gods of war collided in the center of the arena with force enough to crack the ancient stones, each seeking to prove that their understanding of conflict was superior, that their right to the title was undeniable, that divine order or divine accountability would triumph in the oldest court that existed. Trial by combat. The assembled gods of Olympus leaned forward in their seats. They expected Ares to teach the upstart a lesson about divine superiority. They had no idea they were about to witness the education run entirely in reverse. The first exchange lasted 3 seconds and rewrote Olympus's understanding of what combat between gods could be. Ares came in strong, confident, his sword trailing flames as he swung for Kratos' neck with the kind of attack that had decapitated titans. A powerful overhead strike designed to overwhelm through sheer divine might. Exactly the opening Kratos had been expecting. The Ghost of Sparta didn't block. He sidestepped with minimal movement, letting the flaming blade pass inches from his face, and in the same motion wrapped the chains of the blades of chaos around Ares' extended sword arm. A sharp yank disrupted the god's balance, pulling him forward and down, directly into Kratos' rising knee. The impact caught Ares in the ribs with enough force to send a shockwave rippling across the arena. The god of war staggered, genuine surprise flickering across his features. In 1,000 battles, no one had ever made him feel pain in the opening seconds. Kratos didn't give him time to recover. The blades came alive in a whirlwind of hellfire and chain, each strike calculated not for power, but for surgical precision. Left blade targeted the shoulder joint of Ares' sword arm. Right blade carved toward the exposed gap between breastplate and gorget. Chains wrapped, constricted, controlled space and limited options. This wasn't the blind rage of a berserker. This was the refined technique of someone who'd killed war gods before and learned exactly where they were vulnerable. Ares roared and erupted with divine power, flames exploding outward in a sphere that should have incinerated anything mortal. But Kratos had already moved, his guardian shield raised, absorbing the brunt of the blast, while his feet carved trenches in the stone as he was pushed backward. The moment the flames died, Kratos was advancing again. He fights like a tactician, Athena observed from her seat, her strategic mind cataloging every movement. Not a warrior seeking glory, but a soldier seeking victory. There's a difference. He fights like someone who's lost before. Batman's voice came through Diana's hidden comm unit, the Dark Knight watching from the watchtower, analyzing every frame. Someone who learned from every defeat and adapted. That's not divine combat. That's mortal determination weaponized. In the arena, Ares had recovered his composure and was pressing his advantage. He was larger, his reach superior, his divine essence fueled by every war currently raging across Earth. Soldiers dying in conflicts from Syria to Sudan to the South China Sea. All of it fed the god of war's power. His blade came in faster now, abandoning the theatrical swings for efficient strikes. High, low, feint left, and strike right. Good technique, Kratos acknowledged. Better than his universe's Ares had managed before desperation made him sloppy. But still predictable. Kratos had fought Thor, whose speed made lightning look slow. He'd battled Baldur, whose invulnerability turned every strike into calculation of positioning rather than damage. He'd survived Sigrun, the Valkyrie queen, whose aerial assault came from angles that defied three-dimensional thinking. Ares was powerful, skilled, divine. But he'd never truly struggled, never truly feared, never been pushed to the edge where innovation became survival. Kratos had lived on that edge for decades. The Leviathan axe appeared in his hand, He'd sheathed the blades mid-exchange with the fluid muscle memory of someone who'd swapped weapons 10,000 times in combat. Ares' flaming sword met the frost-enchanted axe in a collision of opposing elements that sent steam erupting across the arena. Ice crawled up the blade of Ares' sword, frost fighting flame for dominance. The god of war's eyes widened as his weapon actually slowed, the divine fire struggling against Jotnar magic that predated Olympian supremacy. "Impossible," Ares snarled. "That's not... you can't..." Kratos twisted the axe, using leverage rather than strength, and snapped Ares' sword at the midpoint. The upper half of the blade tumbled through the air, its flames guttering out. Ares stared at the broken weapon in his hand, genuine shock replacing confidence. "In my experience," Kratos said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent arena, "gods who rely on divine weapons forget how to fight when those weapons fail." He proved it. The next 30 seconds were a brutal education in why the Ghost of Sparta had earned his title through action rather than birthright. Kratos fought with everything: fists, elbows, headbutts, the pommel of the axe, his shield's edge. He targeted joints, pressure points, gaps in armor that gods forgot to protect because they'd never needed to. Ares tried to match him in hand-to-hand, but the difference in experience was vast. The DC Ares had fought wars, commanded armies, dueled other gods in ceremonial combat where divine rules and cosmic etiquette mattered. Kratos had brawled through Helheim, climbed the corpse of Kronos while fighting undead soldiers, strangled a god with his bare hands while bleeding from a dozen mortal wounds. There were no rules in survival, no etiquette in desperation. A particularly vicious elbow strike caught Ares across the temple, and the god of war actually dropped to one knee. The assembled Olympians stirred. Several stood from their seats. This wasn't supposed to happen. Ares was one of the 12, a primordial force given divine form. He didn't kneel to demigods. "Stay down," Kratos said quietly, his voice for Ares alone. "You've proven your strength. There's no shame in acknowledging when you're outmatched." Ares' response was a tackle that drove them both across the arena in a tumble of divine bodies and scraping armor. They hit the far wall hard enough to crack the ancient stone, and suddenly they were grappling, wrestling, fighting in the most primitive way possible. Ares was stronger. His divine muscles granted him greater raw power. But Kratos was technical, using leverage and positioning to negate the strength advantage. A triangle choke here, an arm bar there, constant transition between holds that kept Ares defending rather than attacking. "Where did you learn this?" Ares gasped, struggling against a rear-naked choke that was cutting off blood flow to his divine brain. "Gods don't fight like mortals." "I learned," Kratos said, tightening the hold, "from every being that tried to kill me. I absorbed their techniques, understood their strategies, and made them mine. That's how you survive when every god in 2 pantheons wants you dead. You become better than all of them." Ares' vision was darkening. In desperation, he channeled pure divine essence, his body erupting with power that should have thrown Kratos clear. But the Ghost of Sparta held on, accepting the burns, the pain, the agony of grabbing lightning with bare hands, because he'd endured worse. He'd held the blade of Olympus while it destroyed him from the inside. He'd carried the weight of the Temple of Tyr. He'd walked through Helheim's freezing death while poisoned and dying. This was just pain. Pain was temporary. Victory was what mattered. Ares' struggles weakened further, then stopped. Kratos held the choke for 3 more seconds, ensuring it wasn't a feint, then released and rolled clear. Ares lay unconscious on the arena floor, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths, his armor scorched and dented, his pride shattered more thoroughly than any weapon could manage. The Ghost of Sparta stood, breathing hard, bleeding from a dozen minor wounds, his armor cracked and stained with divine ichor from both combatants. He looked up at Zeus on his throne, at the assembled Olympians whose expressions ranged from shock to fury to something that might have been respect. "I won," Kratos said simply. "Honor your word." The silence stretched like a blade across a throat. Zeus stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Lightning played across his shoulders. Brighter now, more agitated. The king of Olympus descended the steps from his throne, each footfall echoing like thunder, until he stood at the edge of the arena, looking down at the being who'd just defeated his son. "You won," Zeus acknowledged, his voice carrying strange harmonics. "Through skill, determination, and techniques no god of Olympus has mastered. You fought not as a divine being seeking glory, but as a survivor seeking victory by any means necessary." "I fought as I always fight," Kratos replied. "To win, to survive, to return home to my son." Zeus was quiet for a moment, and something complex passed across his features. Calculation, respect, and underneath it all, fear. Not fear of Kratos personally, but fear of what he represented. Proof that gods could lose. "The terms were clear," Athena said, standing from her seat. "Kratos won fairly. We must honor our agreement and aid him in returning to his dimension." "No," Hera said, coldly. "We must do no such thing. The combat proved only that he can defeat Ares in single combat. It doesn't erase the threat he represents. A being who's killed 2 pantheons now walks among us, armed and dangerous. Sending him back to his universe doesn't eliminate the possibility he could return. Doesn't prevent others like him from following." "Others like him?" Superman's voice carried from the observers section, sharp with warning. "You mean refugees? People fleeing persecution? You're talking about closing Olympus off from beings who might need help because you're afraid they might challenge your authority." "We're talking about cosmic security," Poseidon countered, "about maintaining divine order across multiple dimensions. This Kratos is an anomaly, a multiversal cancer that's already killed versions of us. Do we simply allow him to leave, trusting he won't return with knowledge of our weaknesses?" "I have no interest in your Olympus," Kratos said, his voice hard. "I've seen enough divine thrones to last eternity. Send me home, and you'll never hear from me again." "Can we trust that?" Hades emerged from the shadows, his pale form seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Can we trust the word of a god-killer who's violated every cosmic law regarding divine immortality? For all we know, your very existence is destabilizing the dimensional barriers. Perhaps your exile was necessary to preserve multiversal integrity. Or perhaps," Thor's voice boomed from the observer section, Mjolnir crackling in his grip, "your fear is making you justify tyranny. I know this pattern. My father used the same reasoning. Security, cosmic order, necessary precautions. All of it code for refusing to acknowledge that divine authority isn't absolute." He stood, and Asgardian power rolled off him in waves. "Kratos won your trial. Honor your word, or admit Olympian oaths mean nothing." Zeus's eyes flashed with lightning, and for a moment, the throne room teetered on the edge of violence between pantheons. Then Diana stepped forward, moving to stand between the escalating confrontation. "Enough," Wonder Woman said, her voice carrying the authority of someone raised among warriors, but tempered by years among heroes. "Father Zeus, I have served Olympus my entire life. I have carried your message to the mortal world, defended divine honor, acted as your champion in countless conflicts." She met his eyes steadily. "But if you break your oath now, if you imprison Kratos after he won fairly, then everything you taught me about justice and honor becomes a lie. And I cannot serve lies." The weight of her words settled over the assembly like a shroud. Diana, Princess of Themyscira, blessed champion of Olympus, was drawing a line in the sand. Zeus looked at his adopted daughter, at the determination in her eyes, and something ancient shifted in his expression. "You would defy Olympus?" he asked quietly. "Choose this stranger over the gods who gave you power." "I would choose justice over convenience," Diana replied, "the way you taught me to." Or was that lesson only meant to apply when it didn't inconvenience divine politics? For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other, and the assembled gods held their collective breath. Then Zeus smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, but it held a grudging respect. "You've grown strong, Diana. Strong enough to question even those who made you." He turned his attention back to Kratos. "Very well, the terms are honored. But know this, Ghost of Sparta. We will aid you in returning to your dimension. But that aid comes with conditions." "What conditions?" Kratos asked warily. "First, you will submit to a binding spell that prevents you from returning to our universe without explicit invitation. You claim no interest in our Olympus. Prove it by accepting exile from our dimension." Kratos considered this. It was reasonable, actually. He had no desire to return here. "Agreed. Second, you will allow Athena to examine the method of your exile. How you came to be here. If dimensional barriers are weakening, if beings are falling through realities, we need to understand why and how to prevent it." Also reasonable. Kratos nodded. "Agreed. Third," Zeus paused, his gaze calculating. "You will share with us the knowledge of how you killed Zeus, not to use against our own king," he added at the alarmed looks from several gods. "But so we understand the vulnerabilities in divine defenses. If you could kill a Zeus, others might attempt the same. We must know how to defend against such techniques." This was the trap, the real price. Zeus wanted to know how to prevent what Kratos represented, divine accountability through force. Kratos looked at Diana, at Superman, at Thor. They couldn't help him with this decision. This was his choice alone. "I will share one technique," he said finally. "One vulnerability in Olympian defenses. But I choose which one, and you accept that as sufficient payment." Zeus's eyes narrowed. "That's not..." "Those are my terms," Kratos interrupted. "You want information that could protect you from other god killers? Fine. But I won't give you everything, won't hand you a complete defense against consequences. Some measure of vulnerability keeps gods honest." The throne room erupted again in argument, but Zeus raised his hand for silence. "Acceptable," the king of Olympus said, surprising everyone. "One technique, one vulnerability, your choice which?" He smiled that dangerous smile again. "Perhaps that limitation will remind us not to take our security for granted." "Father." Ares had regained consciousness and was struggling to his feet, his pride clearly more wounded than his body. "You can't seriously agree to..." "I can and I have," Zeus said firmly. "Kratos has earned his freedom through combat and negotiation. He's proven more capable than we expected, more reasonable than we feared. That deserves acknowledgement." His eyes found Kratos. "But make no mistake, God Killer. This mercy is extended once. If you ever return to our dimension uninvited, if you ever threaten Olympus or its interests, the full might of our pantheon will descend upon you without hesitation or restraint. We will study your techniques, prepare countermeasures, and ensure you face gods who've learned from Ares' mistakes." "I understand," Kratos said. And I hope you understand. I don't want war with you. I never did. I just want to go home." Zeus nodded slowly. "Then let us begin the preparations. Athena, examine the dimensional breach. Hephaestus, forge the binding spell. Hermes, notify the magical community that will require assistance in dimensional navigation." He looked at Kratos one final time. "Rest while we prepare, Ghost of Sparta. You'll need your strength for the journey home." As the gods dispersed to their tasks, Superman approached Kratos, relief evident in his expression. "You did it," Clark said. "You won their respect and their cooperation." "I won a temporary peace," Kratos corrected. "They still fear me, still want me gone. But fear earned through strength is better than death earned through weakness." He looked at the Man of Steel. "Thank you for standing with me, for believing I deserved a chance." "Everyone deserves a chance," Superman said simply. "Even gods who've made terrible mistakes. Especially them, maybe, since they have the power to make things right." Diana joined them, her expression complex, pride mixed with uncertainty. "I defied Olympus today," she said quietly. "Chose justice over divine command. I'm not sure what that means for my relationship with the gods going forward." "It means you're a hero," Kratos said. "Not a servant. There's a difference." Thor clapped Kratos on the shoulder with enough force to stagger a normal human. "Well fought, God Killer. You've earned a tale worthy of Asgardian sagas. When you return to your son, tell him his father showed 2 universes what it means to fight for what matters." As they walked from the arena toward the chambers where Olympus would prepare the dimensional return spell, Kratos allowed himself a small measure of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he'd actually make it home. But in the shadows of Olympus, in spaces between the gods' awareness, something stirred. Something that had been watching, learning, calculating. Darkseid had seen everything through Kalibak's neural implant, had witnessed Kratos' techniques, his power, his vulnerabilities, and the Lord of Apocalypse had made his decision. The God Killer would not be allowed to simply leave. The preparation chamber deep within Olympus hummed with power that made Kratos' teeth ache. Magical arrays carved into marble floors glowed with ethereal light, and the air itself seemed thick with divine mathematics. Equations written in reality rather than symbols, calculating the precise coordinates needed to pierce dimensional barriers. Athena stood at the center of the chamber, her gray eyes unfocused as she communed with forces beyond mortal comprehension. Hephaestus worked at an anvil in the corner, hammer ringing against metal that existed in multiple states simultaneously, forging the binding spell into physical form. Hermes flitted between them, moving so fast he left afterimages, coordinating with mages across Earth who were contributing their own power to the working. "It's fascinating," Athena said without looking at Kratos, her voice distant. "The dimensional breach that brought you here, it wasn't random. Someone targeted this universe specifically, aimed you at us like an arrow." Kratos' jaw clenched. "Tyr, perhaps. Or perhaps Tyr was merely the mechanism. These calculations." She gestured at the glowing arrays. "They suggest intervention from something higher, a cosmic entity that exists across multiple dimensions simultaneously." Her eyes finally focused on him, sharp with intelligence. "Have you angered anyone beyond mere gods, Kratos?" Before he could answer, the Watchtower's emergency signal pierced through Diana's comm unit, a tone reserved for world-ending threats. Batman's voice came through, tight with urgency. "We have a situation. Multiple boom tubes opening across Earth. Apocalypse signatures. This isn't Kalibak testing the waters. This is a full invasion force." Superman was already moving toward the chamber entrance. How many? 73 parademons confirmed and rising. 3 more of Darkseid's elite, Granny Goodness, Desaad, and... Batman paused, his voice dropping. Steppenwolf. They're targeting civilian centers. New York, Tokyo, London, Lagos. Maximum casualties designed to draw out the Justice League. It's a distraction, Diana said immediately, her warrior's mind seeing the strategy. Spread us thin, divide our forces while... The wall of the preparation chamber exploded inward. Not with boom tube technology, but with raw kinetic force that sent marble shrapnel flying like shrapnel from a divine grenade. Through the settling dust stepped a figure that made even the Olympian gods draw back in recognition of power beyond their sphere. Darkseid. Not an avatar, not a projection. The true form of the Lord of Apocalypse, reality itself bending to accommodate his presence. 12 feet of armored tyranny, eyes burning with Omega energy, every movement carrying the weight of conquered galaxies and broken wills. Kratos. Darkseid's voice was stone grinding against the fabric of existence. The God Killer, the anomaly, the being who has accomplished what I have sought for eons, the permanent death of those who claim immortality. Kratos' hands moved to the blades of chaos instantly, hellfire erupting as battle-honed instincts screamed danger on a level he'd rarely encountered. This wasn't a god drunk on power or a titan blind with rage. This was calculated evil, refined through countless conquests, certain of its own superiority through evidence rather than arrogance. Darkseid. Superman's voice carried warning as he stepped between the new god and Kratos. You're violating Olympian sovereignty. Leave, now. Superman. Darkseid's gaze shifted to the Kryptonian, and something like amusement flickered in those burning eyes. Still clinging to diplomatic solutions even as my forces ravage your world. Still believing that words matter to those who speak in conquest. He looked past Superman, his attention fixed on Kratos. I come for him. Surrender the God Killer, and I will withdraw my forces. Refuse, and your Earth suffers. Not happening, Diana said, her sword already drawn. Kratos is under Justice League protection and Olympian sanctuary. You have no authority here. Authority? Darkseid's laugh was like mountains crumbling. I am authority. I am the certainty that binds the multiverse. The anti-life equation made manifest even without its complete formula. He took a step forward, and the magical arrays on the floor cracked under the weight of his presence. And I will have what I came for. Zeus materialized in a flash of lightning, flanked by Poseidon, Hades, and Ares. Still battered from his fight, but ready for more. The king of Olympus leveled his master bolt at Darkseid, power crackling between them. You dare enter Olympus uninvited? Zeus's voice carried divine fury. Even you, Darkseid, must respect the sanctity of our realm. Leave or face the combined might of... The Omega beams lanced out faster than lightning. Zeus barely raised his defenses in time, divine energy meeting new god power in a collision that shattered windows and cracked support columns. The king of Olympus was driven backward, his feet carving trenches in the marble, genuine shock crossing his features. Your might is impressive, Zeus, Darkseid said calmly, as if he hadn't just attacked a pantheon's leader in his own home. But it is limited to this dimension. I exist across countless realities simultaneously. Attacking my form here merely inconveniences me. Whereas you, the Omega beams intensified. You are vulnerable. Poseidon struck next, summoning water from every ocean on Earth, channeling it through dimensional shortcuts to emerge in the chamber as a tsunami of divine wrath. Hades opened rifts to the underworld, releasing shades and spirits bound to his command. Ares, pride wounded but battle lust intact, charged with a spear forged from the concept of conflict itself. Darkseid weathered it all. His hand shot out and caught Ares' spear mid-thrust, the weapon shattering like glass against new god's skin. A gesture sent Poseidon's tsunami, flash-freezing mid-air, rendered inert by technology that treated water as programmable matter. The underworld shades withered in his presence, their essence unable to exist near something that embodied domination so completely. Impressive, Darkseid acknowledged, for Olympians. But you've grown comfortable in your pocket dimension, isolated from the greater cosmic conflicts. You've forgotten what true power looks like. Kratos had seen enough. While the gods threw their mightiest attacks at Darkseid, the Ghost of Sparta moved, not toward the fight, but around it. He recognized the pattern. Powerful being drawing all attention while secondary objectives proceeded unopposed. He'd used it himself when fighting multiple enemies. His eyes found what he was looking for, a shimmer at the chamber's far wall where space folded wrong. A boom tube, partially masked, waiting. It's a retrieval operation, Kratos called out. He's not here to kill. He's here to capture and extract. Batman's voice crackled through the comms. Confirmed. We're detecting secondary boom tube signatures converging on Olympus. Small, precise, extraction teams, not invasion forces. Darkseid's eyes met Kratos's across the chaotic battlefield, and the new god's expression shifted to something approaching respect. Perceptive, Darkseid said, but understanding the trap doesn't help you escape it. The hidden boom tube expanded, and through it poured Darkseid's elite. Not parademons, but specialists. The female Furies, Apocalypse's deadliest warriors, each one a master of combat and subjugation. They moved with coordinated precision, ignoring the battling gods, focused entirely on Kratos. Superman intercepted the first two, moving at speeds that left sonic booms in his wake. His fists connected with Fury armor, sending them flying backward, but they recovered with disturbing speed. Genetic engineering and new god technology making them far more durable than baseline humans. Thor's lightning rained down on a cluster of three more. Mjolnir spinning in patterns that created electromagnetic cages designed to contain meta-human threats. But the Furies adapted, their armor polarizing to disperse the energy, their movements shifting to exploit the gaps between lightning strikes. Wonder Woman met Mad Harriet blade to blade, divine steel against Apocalypse weaponry, and the resulting clash sent shockwaves through the chamber. Diana was faster, more skilled, but Harriet fought with the single-minded focus of someone who'd been engineered for combat since birth and knew only victory or death. And through it all, Darkseid stood at the center, his Omega beams keeping the Olympian gods at bay, while his forces executed their extraction with military precision. Kratos found himself surrounded. 5 Furies circled him, their weapons ranging from electrified whips to gravity distortion gauntlets to blades that phased through conventional armor. They moved like pack hunters, testing his defenses, probing for weaknesses. The Ghost of Sparta smiled grimly. He'd fought Valkyries in similar numbers. At least these opponents didn't fly. He activated Spartan Rage. The transformation was instantaneous. Red energy exploding outward, his already formidable strength magnifying, pain receptors dulling to nothing, centuries of fury channeled into perfect violence. The blades of chaos became extensions of his will, and he moved. The first Fury's whip wrapped around his left arm. Instead of pulling back, Kratos yanked her forward, straight into a headbutt that shattered her helmet and sent her crashing to the ground unconscious. The second tried to phase stab him from behind, but he'd already dropped low, her blade passing through space his torso had occupied a heartbeat before, and his rising uppercut caught her under the chin with enough force to lift her 3 feet off the ground. The remaining three tried coordinated assault, high, low, and center simultaneously. Kratos spun, chains extending, creating a barrier of fire and steel that forced them to adjust mid-attack. The adjustment cost them momentum, and he exploited it ruthlessly. Shield bash to the face. Axe throw that caught one in the shoulder and froze her weapon arm solid. Point-blank blast of hellfire that sent the last one stumbling backward, her armor scorched and smoking. 15 seconds. 5 elite warriors down or incapacitated. Darkseid's eyes gleamed with approval. Magnificent. You're wasted on mere survival, Kratos. Imagine what you could accomplish serving Apocalypse. Imagine the gods you could kill with my resources behind you. Zeus, Odin. The presence itself might fall to someone with your expertise and my backing. I've served gods before. Kratos growled, breathing hard, the Spartan rage still burning through his veins. It always ends in betrayal. I'll carve my own path, and if you stand in my way, you'll what? Darkseid's voice carried genuine curiosity. Kill me. Many have tried. All have failed. I am inevitable, Kratos. I am the end state of all existence. Tyranny perfected, resistance crushed, freedom revealed as the lie it always was. You talk too much, Kratos said, and threw the Leviathan axe. The weapon spun through the air, trailing frost, and Darkseid actually moved to avoid it, acknowledging it as a legitimate threat rather than dismissing it. The axe embedded itself in the wall behind him, ice spreading across ancient marble. Then Kratos recalled it. The axe ripped free and flew back toward his hand, passing directly through the space Darkseid occupied. The new god had to dodge again, and in that moment of defensive movement, Superman struck. The Kryptonian's fist connected with Darkseid's jaw with force measured in megatons, the impact creating a shockwave that rattled the entire chamber. Darkseid actually staggered, his head snapping to the side, genuine surprise crossing his features. Clever, he acknowledged, his jaw already healing. Using the axe's return path to force me into position for Superman's attack, tactical coordination on par with my own elite forces. His Omega beams charged, but cleverness isn't enough. The beams lanced out, not at Superman, but at the support columns throughout the chamber. Ancient marble exploded, structural integrity failing, and suddenly, the ceiling was coming down. No, Athena screamed, trying to reinforce the magical arrays even as tons of stone plummeted toward them. Superman caught one section of falling ceiling, his Kryptonian strength straining. Thor summoned a wind that deflected debris. Diana grabbed Kratos and pulled him clear of a collapsing pillar. In the chaos, Darkseid moved. His hand closed around Kratos' throat with grip strength that exceeded anything the Ghost of Sparta had felt since fighting Thor. The world lurched sickeningly as a boom tube opened directly beneath them, and suddenly they were falling through the screaming void between dimensions. No! Superman dove after them, but the boom tube collapsed before he could follow, reality sealing itself against intrusion. Kratos and Darkseid plummeted through the dimensional corridor, locked together, falling toward Apocalypse and whatever fate the Lord of Tyranny had planned. But Kratos hadn't survived multiple pantheons by accepting defeat. His hand found Darkseid's wrist, and he channeled every ounce of his divine strength into prying those fingers loose. At the same time, he drove his knee up into Darkseid's midsection, not expecting to hurt him, but forcing him to adjust, to brace, to divide his attention. Then Kratos did something insane. He released the blades of chaos and let them fall away into the void. Darkseid's eyes widened fractionally, confusion at the tactic. And in that moment of distraction, Kratos grabbed the edge of the closing boom tube itself. The dimensional portal wasn't designed to be grabbed. It was energy and mathematics, not matter. But Kratos had climbed Olympus on chains that shouldn't have supported weight, had held doorways to Hades open through pure stubborn refusal to accept limits. His fingers found purchase in the impossible, gripping the event horizon of the boom tube. And with a roar that echoed across dimensions, he wrenched it open again. Impossible! Darkseid's shock was genuine now. No being should be able to. Kratos didn't explain. He pulled himself out of the boom tube's pull, dragging his body back toward the DC universe through sheer, bloody-minded determination. Behind him, Darkseid reached for him, trying to pull him back into the void. And from Olympus, from the shattered chamber where his allies fought to stabilize the dimensional breach, a hand reached through. Superman's hand, stretching across realities, bridging the gap. "Grab on!" Clark shouted, his voice barely audible over the screaming chaos of collapsing dimensions. Kratos' fingers closed around Superman's wrist, and the Kryptonian pulled, with strength that moved planets. Darkseid's grip tightened, trying to drag them both into the void, creating a tug-of-war across dimensional barriers with a god-killer as the prize. For a single, crystalline moment, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then Thor's hammer struck the boom tube's anchor point from the other side, disrupting the dimensional math, and the portal destabilized catastrophically. The feedback explosion sent all three of them flying in different directions. Darkseid tumbled back into the screaming void, his form dissolving as the boom tube collapsed. Superman and Kratos were hurled back into Olympus, crashing through already damaged walls and skidding across marble floors. When the dust settled, Kratos lay on his back, breathing hard, every muscle screaming, staring up at Olympus's impossible sky. "Did we win?" he asked the ceiling. "Define win." Batman's voice came through Diana's comm, dry despite the circumstances. "You're alive." Darkseid retreated. "Olympus is heavily damaged but intact. The parademons across Earth are withdrawing." A pause. "Though you should know, Darkseid got what he wanted." Kratos sat up, ignoring protesting muscles. "What?" "He studied you, saw how you fight, how you think, how you resist powers that should be irresistible. The neural implant in Kalibak recorded everything. But that was preliminary data. This," Batman's voice carried grim certainty, "this was a field test. He wanted to see you pushed to your limits under controlled conditions, and we gave him exactly that." The implications settled over the chamber like a shroud. Darkseid hadn't been trying to capture Kratos. Not really. He'd been learning, gathering data, preparing for some future confrontation when he'd have time to analyze, adapt, and counter every technique the God-Killer possessed. "Then he'll be back," Kratos said quietly. "Yes," Superman confirmed, helping him to his feet. "But next time, we'll be ready too, and you won't be facing him alone." Kratos looked around at the assembled heroes and gods, battered, bruised, but standing together despite their differences. Wonder Woman, who'd defied her pantheon for justice. Superman, who'd extended trust when suspicion would have been easier. Thor, who'd stood with a god-killer against tyranny. Even the Olympian gods, grudgingly respecting strength earned rather than inherited. "The dimensional spell," Kratos said, looking at Athena. "Is it still viable? Can you still send me home?" Athena examined the damaged arrays, her expression calculating. "The calculations are intact. The power reserves are depleted but recovering. With time, yes. But Kratos..." She met his eyes. "Darkseid will be watching for the dimensional breach. The moment we open a portal to send you home, he'll know. He might even try to follow you through. Then we'll be ready for that too," Diana said firmly. "We've faced Darkseid before and survived. We'll do it again." Zeus stepped forward, his expression complex. "You fought well, God-Killer. Against my son, against a new god, against fate itself. That earns more than passage home. It earns an offer." He gestured to the damaged but still grand halls of Olympus. "Stay. Join us. With your expertise and our resources, we could prepare defenses against threats like Darkseid. Could protect not just one universe, but many. You could have purpose beyond mere survival." Kratos looked at the king of Olympus for a long moment. Then he smiled. Actually smiled. Something none of them had seen before. "I already have purpose," he said quietly. "A son who needs his father. A life I'm trying to build away from divine wars and cosmic conflicts. That's worth more than all the power you could offer." He turned to Superman. "How long until the spell is ready?" 48 hours, Athena said. "Maybe less if we can channel additional power from Earth's magical communities." "Then I have 48 hours to prepare for whatever Darkseid throws at me next," Kratos said. "And to teach you that vulnerability I promised." "Which vulnerability?" Zeus asked. Kratos' expression grew distant, remembering. Zeus, my Zeus, believed himself invincible because he sat at the pinnacle of divine hierarchy. Kings of gods don't fall, don't fail, don't die. That certainty was his weakness. He looked at each of the Olympians in turn. "Never become so certain of your supremacy that you stop preparing for the possibility of defeat. The moment you believe you cannot fall is the moment you've already lost." The assembled gods absorbed this in thoughtful silence. "That's it?" Ares said. "That's your great secret? Don't be arrogant." "That's the foundation," Kratos corrected. "Arrogance leads to predictability. Predictability creates patterns. Patterns can be exploited. Every god I've killed made the same mistake. They believed their power made them safe. It made them vulnerable." Athena nodded slowly, her strategic mind already working through implications. A simple truth, but profound in its application. "The best weapons usually are," Kratos said. As the Olympians dispersed to begin repairs and preparations for the final dimensional spell, Superman approached Kratos one last time. 48 hours, Clark said. "What will you do until then?" Kratos looked out through the shattered wall at Earth spinning below, at a universe he'd never asked to enter, but had found unexpected allies within. "I'm going to rest," he said. "Prepare, and pray to whatever forces govern the multiverse that when I walk through that dimensional portal, Darkseid doesn't follow me home." "And if he does?" Superman asked. The Ghost of Sparta's hand rested on the Leviathan axe, and his expression hardened into something ancient and terrible and absolutely certain. "Then I'll teach him the same lesson I taught 2 pantheons," Kratos said quietly. "That gods can die, and that some beings simply refuse to kneel." 48 hours passed like the breath before a storm. Kratos spent the time in productive solitude, meditating in a chamber Hephaestus had provided. A forge where the sounds of hammer on metal and the heat of divine fire reminded him of simpler times. He sharpened his blades, repaired his armor, and prepared his mind for whatever came next. The Justice League used the time to coordinate with magical communities across Earth. Constantine grumbled about divine bureaucracy, but contributed his expertise. Zatanna channeled energy from ley lines spanning the globe. Dr. Fate opened his tower's reserves of mystical power. Even Batman, with no magic of his own, designed contingencies for 17 different scenarios where the dimensional portal might be compromised or attacked. The Avengers maintained a perimeter around Mount Olympus, with Tony's satellites tracking for boom tube signatures anywhere on Earth. Thor remained close, having found in Kratos a kindred spirit, someone else, who understood what it meant to love your family while questioning their methods. On the morning of the departure, they gathered once more in Olympus's great hall, now repaired through divine power and Hephaestus's engineering. The magical arrays glowed with accumulated energy, sufficient to punch through dimensional barriers and send Kratos home. Home. The word tasted strange after everything that had happened. "The calculations are precise," Athena said, reviewing the spell work one final time. "We've located your home dimension's signature using residual energy from your arrival. The portal will deposit you in Midgard, close to where you were taken from. The binding spell is also complete." She held up a bracelet of Olympian gold, inscribed with symbols that hurt to look at directly. "Once you wear this, you cannot return to our universe without explicit invitation from the pantheon. It's keyed to your specific divine signature." Kratos took the bracelet and examined it. No tricks that he could detect. No hidden betrayals. Just honest magic doing exactly what it claimed. He slipped it onto his wrist, and it contracted to fit perfectly, seamlessly. A subtle weight, barely noticeable, but he could feel the binding take effect. Dimensional barriers solidifying between him and this universe. "It's done," he said. "I'm locked out." "Insurance," Zeus said, though his tone was less hostile than it had been. "For both our sakes. Your universe needs you. Ours needs protection from god-killers who've proven their capability." He paused, then extended his hand. "But know that if circumstances were different, I would have valued having you as an ally rather than a threat." Kratos looked at the offered hand, so similar to the gesture Superman had made when this all began. A bridge across philosophy and fear, offered despite every reason for conflict. He clasped Zeus's forearm in the warrior's grip. "If your Olympus remains just, if you continue protecting mortals rather than exploiting them, then you have nothing to fear from god-killers. We only rise when gods fall to tyranny. A warning I'll take to heart," Zeus replied. Diana approached next, her expression carrying the weight of someone who'd fundamentally re-examined her worldview over the past 2 days. "You changed something in me," she said quietly. "Made me question assumptions I'd held my entire life. I don't know if I should thank you or resent you for that." "Truth rarely comes gently," Kratos replied, "but it's still worth seeking." "Will you be all right?" Diana asked. "Returning to your universe, to your son, after everything you've experienced here?" Kratos' expression softened fractionally. "I'll tell Atreus that I met heroes in another world. Real heroes, not gods playing at protection. That might give him hope for what we're trying to build, a world where power serves justice instead of the reverse." Superman stepped forward, and despite everything, he was smiling. "I'm glad we met, Kratos, even if the circumstances were complicated. You reminded me that redemption is always possible, even for those who've done terrible things. That matters." "And you reminded me," Kratos said, "that not all powerful beings abuse that power, that some actually deserve the trust mortals place in them. In my experience, that's rare." Thor clapped him on the shoulder with enthusiasm that would have staggered a normal human. "Fight well in your universe, God-killer. And if you ever find a way to send messages across dimensions, I'd hear the tales of your battles. Asgard values stories of worthy combat." "I'll keep that in mind," Kratos said with something that might have been a smile. Flash vibrated up, grinning. "So, before you go, could you maybe juggle the blades? Just once? I've been wondering for 2 days if—" "No," Kratos said, but there was warmth in his voice. "Worth a shot," Barry said, unrepentant. Batman approached last, his expression as unreadable as ever behind the cowl. He handed Kratos a small device, no larger than a coin. "What is this?" Kratos asked. "Dimensional beacon," Batman explained. "One use only. If Darkseid or something worse follows you to your universe, activate it We'll find a way to reach you. The binding spell prevents you from coming here, but it doesn't prevent us from going there." Kratos stared at the device, then at Batman. "You'd cross dimensions to help me fight my battles?" "We'd cross dimensions to stand with an ally," Batman corrected. "There's a difference." The Ghost of Sparta carefully secured the beacon in his armor, next to his heart. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Batman said. "Just survive. And if you get the chance, tell your son that his father found people worth trusting. That seems important for him to know." Kratos nodded, not trusting his voice. Athena raised her hands, divine energy flowing through the arrays. "The portal is ready. When you step through, the transition will be instantaneous from your perspective. But dimensional travel is disorienting. You may experience temporal displacement, phantom memories, a sense of existing in multiple places simultaneously. These effects are temporary." "I've died and returned," Kratos said. "I can handle disorientation." The portal began to open. Not the violent tearing of a boom tube, but a gentle parting of reality. Through it, Kratos could see snow, trees, the familiar landscapes of Midgard painted in winter white. Home. But before he could step through, alarms shrieked. "Boom tube signatures!" Cyborg's voice crackled through the comm network. "Multiple contacts converging on Mount Olympus. Big ones. This isn't a stealth extraction, this is..." The wall exploded inward for the second time in 2 days. But this time, it wasn't Darkseid who entered. It was an army. Hundreds of parademons poured through multiple boom tubes, their chittering screams filling the air. Behind them marched Darkseid's elite, Granny, Goodness with her furies, Desaad with his torture devices reconfigured as weapons, Steppenwolf with his electro-axe crackling. And at the center of it all, reality bending to accommodate his presence, Darkseid himself. "Did you truly believe?" the Lord of Apocalypse said, his voice carrying across the chaos, "that I would allow such a valuable asset to simply escape?" "I said I would study you, Kratos. I did not say I would accept your departure." The dimensional portal flickered, destabilizing under the interference from multiple boom tubes operating simultaneously. "The portal's collapsing!" Athena shouted, trying to channel more power to stabilize it. "If he doesn't go through now, we'll lose the dimensional lock. It could take months to recalculate." "Then he goes now," Superman said, positioning himself between Darkseid and Kratos. "We'll hold them off. We've fought Darkseid before." "Not like this," Batman interrupted, his tactical mind processing the battle space. "He's committed his full forces. This isn't a raid, this is conquest. He means to take Olympus and Kratos simultaneously." Diana's sword rang as she drew it. "Then we fight. For Earth, for Olympus, for the right of beings to choose their own destiny." Thor's hammer crackled with lightning. "For honor, for justice, for the principle that tyrants don't dictate terms to heroes." The Olympian gods mobilized, divine power flooding the chamber as they prepared for war. Zeus's master bolt ignited with enough energy to light the sky. Poseidon summoned tidal forces from every ocean. Ares, pride still wounded but battle lust burning bright, charged forward with a war cry that shook the foundations. And Kratos stood at the threshold of the portal home, faced with an impossible choice. Step through and save himself, leaving allies to fight a battle he'd helped provoke, or stay and fight alongside those who'd given him trust when suspicion would have been easier. The Ghost of Sparta had spent centuries running from divine conflicts, seeking only peace for himself and his son. He'd destroyed pantheons to buy freedom, walked away from burning Olympus to escape the cycle of violence. But these weren't the corrupt gods of his universe. These were heroes, allies, people who'd stood with him against their own gods when justice demanded it. And Kratos realized something that cut through all his pain and guilt and desperate desire to return home. He'd spent so long fighting for his right to walk away that he'd forgotten what it meant to fight for something worth staying for. "Athena," he said, his voice carrying across the pre-battle chaos. "Close the portal." "What?" The goddess of wisdom stared at him in shock. "Kratos, this is your chance. If you don't go now, close it," he repeated, turning away from the view of Midgard and snow and home. "Redirect the power to Olympus's defenses. If Darkseid wants to conquer this realm, he'll have to go through every god, hero, and god-killer standing in his way." Superman's expression shifted to concern. "Kratos, your son will understand that his father stood with allies when they needed him," Kratos said firmly. "He'll understand that running from every fight isn't strength. It's just another kind of prison." His hands found the blades of chaos, and hellfire erupted. "And I'm done with prisons." Darkseid's eyes gleamed with something that might have been satisfaction. "Admirable, foolish, but admirable. You choose death with strangers over life with your child?" "I choose," Kratos said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries and the certainty of someone who'd finally found a truth worth fighting for. "To stand with those who stood with me. That's not foolishness. That's what separates heroes from tyrants." He took his place in the battle line between Superman and Wonder Woman, the blades of chaos burning bright, the Leviathan axe cold in his grip. "Besides," he added, a grim smile touching his lips, "I've killed 2 pantheons worth of gods. What's one more tyrant?" Darkseid raised his hand, and the parademon surged forward like a living tide of claws and teeth and mindless devotion to tyranny. "Then die with your adopted allies," the Lord of Apocalypse declared, "and know that your son will wait forever for a father who chose heroism over family." The words were designed to cut, to wound, to make Kratos doubt. Instead, they made him certain. "My son," Kratos said quietly, just before the 2 armies collided, "learned from me that sometimes you fight not because you want to, but because it's right." I'm teaching him that lesson one more time. Then there was no more room for words. The battle for Olympus began. Superman met Darkseid in a clash that created shockwaves across dimensions, 2 beings of near infinite power testing each other's limits. Wonder Woman and Thor led the assault against Steppenwolf, divine weapons meeting new god technology in a battle that shook mountains. The Mao, Olympian gods, unleashed centuries of stored power against parademons that had conquered galaxies. And Kratos, the Ghost of Sparta, the god killer, the being who destroyed pantheons and walked away from burning Olympus, fought not for vengeance or survival or escape. He fought for the simple, radical idea that heroes stood together. The blades of chaos carved through parademons with practiced efficiency. The Leviathan axe froze enemies mid-charge. The Guardian shield turned Assad's torture weapons back on their creator. And through it all, Kratos moved with the terrible grace of someone who'd learned combat not in training halls, but in the crucible of divine war. He saved Diana from a parademon flanking maneuver, his blade taking the creature's head before it could strike. She nodded thanks and returned the favor seconds later, her lasso pulling him clear of one of Darkseid's Omega beams. Thor's hammer struck in coordination with Kratos' axe, the combination of Asgardian lightning and Jotnar frost creating a feedback explosion that scattered an entire squadron of enemies. Superman, locked in brutal combat with Darkseid, called out, "Kratos, left flank." The god-killer pivoted instantly, trusting the warning without question, and threw the Leviathan axe. It caught Granny Goodness mid-spell, disrupting whatever horror she'd been conjuring. This was different from the isolated wars he'd fought before. Different from the lonely battles where trust was weakness and allies were liabilities. This was coordinated, strategic, a symphony of violence where every warrior supported the others, where individual strength multiplied through unity. This was what it meant to fight as a hero instead of a monster. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. Time losing meaning in the chaos of divine combat. Casualties mounted on both sides. Several Olympian gods fell back, wounded. Flash was hit by a stray Omega beam and had to be pulled to safety by Cyborg. Tony's armor took critical damage that forced him to eject and fight in his backup suit. But they held. Against impossible odds, against an invasion force that had toppled galaxies, the combined might of Olympus and the Justice League held their ground. And slowly, incrementally, they began to push back. Darkseid noticed. The Lord of Apocalypse pulled back from his duel with Superman, his expression calculating. He'd achieved what he came for, not Kratos' capture, but data. He'd seen how the God-Killer fought alongside others, had identified new patterns, new vulnerabilities, new applications of his techniques. Enough, Darkseid declared, and his forces immediately began withdrawing through boom tubes. I came to test your resolve and measure your capabilities. Both have been adequately assessed. Retreat then, Zeus called out, his master bolt still blazing. And know that Olympus will not fall to tyranny. Retreat? Darkseid's laugh was like the heat death of universes. This was never conquest. This was education. And I am very satisfied with the lessons learned. His burning eyes found Kratos one final time. I will see you again, God-Killer. Perhaps in this universe. Perhaps in yours. Perhaps in the spaces between where you cannot hide behind allies. He paused. Your choice to stay was admirable. I wonder if your son will agree when I find him. The threat hit Kratos like a physical blow. Before he could respond, Darkseid stepped through a boom tube and vanished, his army following in coordinated withdrawal. Silence crashed across Olympus's great hall like a wave. They'd won. Barely, at great cost. But they'd won. Kratos stood among heroes and gods, breathing hard, covered in Paradaman blood and his own ichor, and felt the weight of Darkseid's final words settling on his shoulders. Superman approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. We'll protect your son. If Darkseid tries to reach your universe, we'll find a way to stop him. I should have gone through, Kratos said hollowly. Should have taken my chance when I had it. You made a choice, Diana said firmly. A heroic choice. Standing with allies instead of running. That matters, Kratos. It changes things. Does it change the fact that my son is now in danger because I stayed? Kratos' voice was raw. Does it change that Darkseid now knows exactly how to hurt me? It changes, Batman said, his voice cutting through the despair. That you're not alone. The portal's collapsed, yes. But Athena says it can be rebuilt. It will take time, weeks, maybe months. But it can be done. And in that time, we prepare. We fortify. We ensure that when you do return home, you carry with you knowledge, alliances, and capabilities that make you stronger than when you left. Thor nodded. And in the meantime, you have shelter here. Purpose. The chance to train with warriors from this universe, learn techniques you've never encountered, prepare for the battles ahead. Kratos looked around at the faces surrounding him. Earnest, determined, refusing to accept defeat even in the face of seemingly impossible odds. You truly believe we can win this? He asked. I believe, Superman said with that unshakable conviction that defined him. That we never stop trying, that as long as we stand together, there's always hope. And that Darkseid has made one critical mistake. What mistake? Clark smiled. He's never faced someone with your experience fighting tyrannical gods who also has the Justice League watching his back. He knows how to break individuals. He's mastered conquering the isolated and afraid. The smile widened. But he's about to learn what happens when a god killer fights alongside heroes who refuse to abandon their own. Athena stepped forward, her gray eyes thoughtful. The spell can be reconstructed in approximately 6 weeks. I'll need time to recalibrate the dimensional coordinates and accumulate sufficient power, but it's achievable. Until then, she looked at Zeus. The king of Olympus nodded slowly. Until then, you have Olympus's sanctuary, our resources, our knowledge. We fought well together today, God Killer. Perhaps we can learn from each other while preparing for what comes next. Kratos absorbed this, feeling the pull between desperate need to return home and pragmatic understanding that rushing back unprepared might doom everything. 6 weeks, he said finally. I'll use the time to prepare, to learn, to become strong enough to protect my son from threats that can cross dimensions. His jaw clenched. And when I return home, if Darkseid follows, then he'll find you're not the same god killer who left, Diana finished. You'll be something new, something even gods should fear. A god killer with allies, Thor added. A survivor with purpose, Superman said. A monster who chose to become a hero, Batman concluded. Kratos looked at each of them, these beings who'd extended trust when he deserved suspicion, who'd stood with him against both pantheons and cosmic tyrants, who refused to abandon him even when prudence suggested otherwise. And the Ghost of Sparta, for the first time in centuries, felt something he'd almost forgotten. Not quite peace, not yet redemption, but the possibility of both. 6 weeks, he repeated. Then I go home, to my son, to the life I'm building away from divine wars. But until then? Flash asked. Kratos allowed himself a genuine smile, small but real. Until then, he said, I learn what it means to fight as a hero instead of a monster. And when Darkseid comes for me or mine, I'll show him exactly what I've learned. The assembled heroes and gods nodded in unison. Outside, through Olympus's shattered walls, Earth spun peacefully below, unaware of how close it had come to conquest. Somewhere in another universe, a boy named Atreus waited for his father. Not knowing the battles being fought or the alliances being forged in his name, and in the spaces between dimensions, in the screaming void where realities touched, Darkseid watched and planned and prepared. The war had only begun, but for the first time, Kratos faced it not alone, but surrounded by those who'd proven that heroism wasn't about divine power or cosmic authority. It was about standing together when darkness came. It was about choosing to fight for others when running would be easier. It was about believing, despite every reason for despair, that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. The Ghost of Sparta had learned many lessons in his long, bloody existence. But this one, this lesson in hope and alliance and heroism, might be the most important yet. The multiverse is infinite. And within its endless possibilities, stories of collision and convergence echo across dimensional barriers. Kratos, the god killer who destroyed pantheons in desperate pursuit of freedom, had found something unexpected in the DC universe. Heroes worth standing with, gods worth respecting, and the possibility that his endless war might have purpose beyond mere survival. 6 weeks would pass in training, preparation, and the forging of bonds across philosophical chasms. The Justice League would learn techniques for combating divine threats from someone who'd perfected the art of deicide. Olympus would adapt its defenses, incorporating mortal innovation with divine power. And Kratos would discover that strength multiplied when shared, that vulnerability accepted among allies was different from weakness exploited by enemies. When the dimensional portal finally reopened, when he stepped through to return to Midgard and his waiting son, he would carry with him more than just scars and weapons. He would carry knowledge, alliances, the understanding that he didn't have to face every battle alone, that calling for help wasn't surrender, but strategy. And if Darkseid followed him home, if the Lord of Apocalypse sought to test his theories about God-killing and cosmic order in Kratos' native universe, he would discover that the Ghost of Sparta had become something new. Not just a survivor, not merely a killer of gods, a hero who'd learned from the best what it meant to stand for something greater than himself. The invasion of the DC universe had ended not in conquest or escape, but in transformation. Kratos had arrived as a refugee seeking only passage home. He would leave as an ally, a friend, a warrior who'd proven that redemption was always possible for those willing to change. Atreus would hear stories of his father's time in another world, would learn that even beings who'd committed terrible acts could choose different paths, would understand that the cycle of violence could be broken not through isolation, but through connection. Standing with others who refused to let darkness define them. The multiverse had brought Kratos to the DC universe through forced exile. It would send him home through chosen alliance. And in the spaces between realities, where gods and heroes and tyrants all played their eternal games, a new precedent had been established. That power without accountability could be challenged, that cosmic order could bend toward justice, and that sometimes the most dangerous beings in existence were those who'd learned to fight not for themselves, but for others. The Ghost of Sparta had invaded the DC universe, and both realities would be forever changed by what he'd learned there.